The shocking choice that changed everything. In a gleaming Manhattan boardroom, billionaire CEO Clara Hayes watched in horror as her 10-year-old daughter Maya pointed past senators, tech moguls, and oil tycoons to choose the building's janitor as her new father. What happened next would shake the foundations of power itself and prove that sometimes a child's heart sees what money can't buy. Stay with me until the end of this incredible story and comment below what city you're watching from, so I can see how far this tale has traveled across the world. The 42nd floor of Hayes Tower gleamed under the harsh fluorescent lights, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering a commanding view of Manhattan's skyline. But inside the pristine boardroom, the atmosphere crackled with tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Clara Hayes, CEO and founder of Hayes Industries, stood at the head of the polished mahogany table like a general surveying her troops. Her perfectly tailored Armani suit was as sharp as her reputation, and her steel-gray eyes held the cold calculation that had built her empire from nothing. "Gentlemen," Clara's voice cut through the silence with surgical precision. "Today we settle this matter once and for all." Around the table sat 5 of the most powerful men in America. Senator Robert Mitchell, his silver hair perfectly coiffed, adjusted his presidential cufflinks with practiced ease. Tech billionaire Marcus Chen scrolled through his phone with the casual arrogance of someone who owned half of Silicon Valley. Oil magnate James Bradford drummed his fingers impatiently, each tap worth roughly $1 million. Investment banker William Cross checked his Rolex for the 3rd time in 5 minutes, while pharmaceutical CEO Richard Stone studied the room with the detached interest of a scientist examining specimens. But the most important person in the room wasn't one of these titans of industry. She was a small 10-year-old girl with Clara's determined jawline and eyes that held far too much wisdom for her age. Maya Hayes sat in an oversized leather chair, her legs swinging nervously as she clutched a worn stuffed elephant, the only thing in the room that didn't cost more than most people's houses. "Maya," Clara continued, her voice softening by barely a degree, "you've had 6 months to adjust to the reality of our situation. Your father is gone, and it's time for you to choose a new one from these distinguished candidates." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Maya's small hands gripped her stuffed elephant tighter, her knuckles white against the gray fabric. This wasn't the first time they'd had this conversation, but it was the first time Clara had made it feel so final, so absolute. Senator Mitchell leaned forward with his practiced politician's smile. "Maya, sweetheart, I want you to know that if you choose me, you'll have the best education money can buy. Private tutors, the finest schools, maybe even a pony." "A pony?" Maya's voice was barely a whisper. "2 ponies if you want them," Mitchell said with a chuckle that sounded like he'd practiced it in front of a mirror. Marcus Chen looked up from his phone long enough to add, "Forget ponies. I can give you your own theme park. Virtual reality artificial intelligence tutors robots that do your homework. The future kid." James Bradford's laugh was like gravel in a cement mixer. "Theme parks are for children. Maya's going to be a woman of substance. Oil never goes out of style, little lady. Generational wealth, private jets, islands in the Caribbean. Real power." William Cross straightened his tie and fixed Maya with his best boardroom stare. "What these gentlemen are offering you is nice, Maya, but what I'm offering is security. Financial instruments that will ensure you never want for anything. Trust funds, investment portfolios, a foundation that will outlive us all." Richard Stone had remained quiet throughout the presentations, studying Maya with the same intensity he brought to his pharmaceutical research. When he finally spoke, his voice was measured and clinical. "Maya, what you need isn't toys or money. You need stability. Medical care, educational advancement, access to the best minds in science and medicine. I can give you a future where you're not just wealthy, you're enlightened. Clara watched her daughter's face throughout each presentation, searching for any sign of which way she was leaning. But Maya's expression remained unreadable, her dark eyes moving from one man to the next, with the careful attention of someone far older than her years. Well, Clara's patience was wearing thin. You've heard what each of these men can offer you. They're all successful, powerful, and capable of providing you with everything you could ever want. So who is it going to be, Maya? The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. Outside the windows, Manhattan hummed with its usual chaos, but inside the boardroom, time seemed suspended. The 5 men waited with the barely contained eagerness of predators circling wounded prey, while Clara's jaw tightened with each passing second. Finally, Maya stood up from her chair, her stuffed elephant tucked under one arm. She was so small in the vast room, dwarfed by the massive table and towering windows, but there was something in her posture that made her seem larger than her 10 years. "I've made my choice," she said, her voice clearer and stronger than it had been all day. Clara felt a surge of relief mixed with triumph. Finally, her daughter was ready to be practical, to understand the realities of their world. "Excellent. Who will it be?" Maya turned toward the door of the boardroom, and for a moment Clara thought she was going to walk out without answering. But instead, Maya pointed to a figure that none of the powerful men had even noticed. "Him," Maya said simply. "I choose Daniel." The room erupted in confusion. The 5 suitors turned in their chairs, following Maya's pointed finger to the corner of the room, where Daniel Cole was quietly emptying a wastebasket. He was tall and lean, probably in his early 30s, with work-worn hands and clothes that had clearly seen better days. His brown hair was slightly mussed, and his blue eyes were wide with shock, as every person in the room suddenly focused on him. "I'm sorry." Clara's voice was dangerously quiet, the kind of quiet that preceded earthquakes. "Did you just point to the janitor?" "His name is Daniel," Maya said firmly, "and yes, I choose him." Daniel dropped the wastebasket he'd been holding, and it clattered to the floor with a sound that seemed to echo forever in the stunned silence. I think there's been some kind of mistake," he stammered, taking a step backward toward the door. "There's no mistake," Maya said, turning to face her mother with a determination that made Clara's blood run cold. "Daniel is the one I want to be my new father." Senator Mitchell was the first to recover from the shock. "Now see here, this is highly irregular. You can't seriously be considering this person as a suitable candidate." "He's not even on the list." Marcus Chen added his usual tech bro casualness replaced by genuine outrage. James Bradford's face was turning an alarming shade of purple. "This is preposterous. I didn't fly here from Texas to be upstaged by the help." But Clara wasn't listening to their protests. Her eyes were locked on her daughter, and for the first time in years, she was seeing something she didn't understand, something she couldn't control. "Maya." Clara's voice was carefully controlled, but there was steel underneath it. "I think you're confused. This man is an employee. He empties trash cans and mops floors. He's not suitable." "He's more suitable than any of them." Maya shot back, her small chin jutting out defiantly. Daniel looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. "Look, I really think I should go. This seems like a family matter, and I'm just here to do my job." "No." Maya's voice cracked like a whip. "Don't leave, please, Daniel. Tell them about the day you saved Mr. Peanuts." Clara's perfectly manicured eyebrows drew together in confusion. "Mr. Peanuts?" Maya clutched her stuffed elephant tighter. This is Mr. Peanuts, and 6 months ago when Daddy died, I was so sad that I threw him out the window of our apartment. I thought if I got rid of everything that reminded me of Daddy, it wouldn't hurt so much. The room had gone deadly quiet. Even the 5 suitors had stopped their indignant muttering to listen. I was crying on the balcony when Daniel found me, Maya continued. He was working on the building's window washing crew that day, and he saw Mr. Peanuts on the sidewalk 30 floors down. He could have just left him there, but instead, he climbed down all those flights of stairs on his lunch break and brought Mr. Peanuts back to me. Daniel's face had gone red. It wasn't a big deal. She was upset, and it was just a stuffed animal. It was everything, Maya said fiercely. You didn't ask me why I threw him away, or tell me I was being silly, or try to buy me a new one. You just brought him back and told me that sometimes the things we love most are worth fighting for, even when they hurt. Clara felt something cold settle in her stomach. She remembered that day. Maya had been inconsolable for hours, and Clara had been in back-to-back meetings dealing with the crisis that her husband's sudden death had created for the company. She'd sent 3 different nannies to handle the situation, but none of them had been able to calm Maya down. By the time Clara had returned home that evening, Maya was quiet and clutching her elephant, and Clara had been too exhausted to ask how the problem had been resolved. And that's not the only time, Maya continued, warming to her subject. When I got lost in the lobby last month, Daniel was the only one who stopped to help me. Security just walked past, and all those important people in their expensive suits acted like I was invisible. But Daniel sat with me until Mommy's assistant came to find me. He asked me about school and my favorite books, and he actually listened to what I said. William Cross cleared his throat uncomfortably. Young lady, while I'm sure this man is adequate at his job, you need to understand the difference between kindness and suitability. A father figure needs to be able to provide for you, to open doors, to give you opportunities. What kind of opportunities? Maya asked, her voice sharp with challenge. Well, educational opportunities, social connections, financial security. Daniel teaches me things too, Maya interrupted. He taught me how to tie my shoes the right way so they don't come undone. He showed me how to fold paper airplanes that actually fly. He knows all the constellations and told me stories about them when I was scared during the thunderstorm last week. Clara's jaw clenched. She'd been in London during that thunderstorm, closing a deal worth $50 million. She'd called to check on Maya, but the nanny had assured her everything was fine. You were scared? Clara asked quietly. Maya nodded. The power went out, and I couldn't sleep. Daniel was working late doing some kind of maintenance thing, and he heard me crying. He sat with me in the dark and told me about Orion and the Big Dipper, until the power came back on. Richard Stone adjusted his glasses with clinical precision. Maya, I understand that this man has been kind to you, but kindness isn't enough. You need someone who can challenge your intellect, who can introduce you to the complexities of the modern world. You mean someone who ignores me unless there's something in it for them? Maya's voice was getting stronger, more confident. Because that's what all of you do. Senator Mitchell, you've been here for an hour, and the only thing you've asked me is whether I want a pony. Mr. Chen, you haven't looked up from your phone except to offer me robots. Mr. Bradford, you keep calling me little lady, like I'm some kind of pet. Mr. Cross, you talk about me like I'm a portfolio you want to manage, and Dr. Stone, you look at me like I'm one of your experiments. The 5 men shifted uncomfortably in their seats, but none of them could deny the accuracy of Maya's observations. But Daniel, Maya's voice softened. Daniel asks me how my day was, and actually waits for an answer. He remembers that I don't like mushrooms on my pizza, and that I'm afraid of elevators sometimes. He knows that I miss my daddy, and that I'm angry at mommy for always working, but he doesn't try to fix it or explain it away. He just listens. Clara felt like she'd been slapped. When was the last time she'd asked Maya about her day? When was the last time she'd sat with her daughter without checking her phone or thinking about work? Maya. Clara's voice was strained. You're being emotional. I understand that you're grateful to Daniel for his kindness, but gratitude isn't the same as suitability. These men can give you things that Daniel simply cannot. Like what? Maya challenged. Stability, security, a future. Daniel already gives me those things, Maya said simply. When I'm with him, I feel safe. When I talk to him, I feel heard. When I'm scared or sad, he makes me feel better. Isn't that what a father is supposed to do? Daniel, who had been standing frozen in shock throughout this entire exchange, finally found his voice. Maya, sweetheart, your mother is right about some things. I can't give you ponies or theme parks or trust funds. I live in a one-bedroom apartment in Queens and I drive a 15-year-old Honda. I'm not educated like these gentlemen and I don't have connections or influence. I don't care about any of that, Maya said fiercely. But you should, Daniel continued gently. You're going to grow up in a world where those things matter. Your mother is trying to make sure you have every advantage possible. Clara felt a strange mixture of gratitude and irritation at Daniel's words. At least someone in the room understood the realities of the situation. But Maya wasn't finished. You want to know what I think about advantages? I think the biggest advantage I could have is a father who actually wants to be my father, not because of what it gets him, but because he cares about me. She turned to face the 5 suitors, her small frame radiating a dignity that made them all shift uncomfortably. Senator Mitchell, if you marry my mother, you get a wife who's connected to every major corporation in America, and a stepdaughter who'll make you look family-friendly in campaign photos. Mr. Chen, you get access to mom's manufacturing contracts and a chance to seem more human to investors. Mr. Bradford, you get partnerships with Hayes Industries and entree into circles that have been closed to you. Mr. Cross, you get to manage billions of dollars in assets. Dr. Stone, you get funding for your research and access to our biotech investments. The accuracy of Maya's assessment was devastating. Each man had in fact approached Clara with exactly those motivations, though they'd dressed them up in prettier language. But what do I get from any of you? Maya continued. A stepfather who sees me as a business transaction. Someone who'll be nice to me as long as it serves his purposes, but who'll never really love me or want what's best for me. Marcus Chen tried to interject. Now that's not fair. Isn't it? Maya cut him off. How many times have any of you asked me what I want? How many times have you tried to find out what I like or what makes me happy? You've all spent months courting my mother, but not one of you has ever had a real conversation with me. The silence that followed was deafening. Daniel has, Maya said quietly. Daniel knows that I want to be a veterinarian when I grow up, because I love animals. He knows that I hate math, but I'm good at it, and that I love to read, but I get frustrated when books talk down to kids. He knows that I miss my daddy every single day, and that sometimes I'm angry at him for dying and leaving me alone. Clara's throat tightened. She hadn't known any of those things. Most importantly, Maya continued, Daniel has never once asked me what it's like to be rich, or tried to get me to put in a good word with my mother, or hinted that he'd like special treatment because he's nice to me. He treats me like I'm just Maya, not Maya Hayes, heiress to a fortune. Daniel looked like he was being tortured. Maya, what you're saying is very kind, but it's not kind, Maya interrupted. It's true, and that's exactly why I choose you, Because you're the only one in this room who doesn't want anything from me or my mother except to be decent human beings." Clara's hands were clenched so tightly that her perfectly manicured nails were digging into her palms. This was not how this was supposed to go. Maya was supposed to choose one of the 5 candidates, preferably Senator Mitchell or Marcus Chen, both of whom offered the best strategic advantages. She was supposed to be practical, to understand that emotions were luxuries they couldn't afford. "Maya," Clara's voice was dangerously soft. "You're 10 years old. You don't understand the complexities of adult relationships or the responsibilities that come with our position. I'm not asking you to choose someone you like. I'm asking you to choose someone who can provide for you and protect you in ways that I cannot." "You mean someone who can enhance your business empire?" Maya shot back with startling insight. The accusation hit Clara like a physical blow. "That is not what this is about." "Isn't it?" Maya's voice was getting louder, more passionate. "Daddy always said that you married him because you loved him, not because of what he could do for the company. But he's gone now, and suddenly I'm supposed to help you choose a new husband based on what he can contribute to Hayes Industries." "Your father's situation was different," Clara said tightly. How was it different?" Clara opened her mouth to respond, then closed it again. The truth was too complicated, too painful to explain to a 10-year-old. David Hayes had been different because Clara had married him before she'd built her empire, when love had seemed more important than strategy. But David was gone, killed in a car accident that had left Clara alone with a company to run and a daughter to raise, and she couldn't afford the luxury of marrying for love again. "It just was," Clara said finally. "That's not an answer," Maya said with devastating simplicity. James Bradford, who had been getting redder and more agitated throughout this exchange, finally exploded. "This is ridiculous. We're sitting here listening to a child lecture us about adult matters, while some janitor stands in the corner like he belongs here. This is not how business is conducted." "Exactly," Maya said, turning to face him. "This isn't business. This is supposed to be about family." "Your family is a business," Marcus Chen said bluntly. "Whether you like it or not, kiddo, you're going to inherit one of the largest fortunes in America. That comes with responsibilities and expectations." "I know exactly what I'm going to inherit," Maya said quietly. "The question is, what kind of person I'm going to be when I do." The weight of her words settled over the room like a shroud. Here was a 10-year-old girl facing down some of the most powerful men in America, and somehow she was winning. Clara could feel control slipping away from her like sand through her fingers. This meeting was supposed to have been a formality, a way to give Maya the illusion of choice, while steering her toward the obviously correct decision. Instead, it had become a referendum on everything Clara had built, everything she believed in. "Daniel," Clara's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "I think it's time for you to leave." Daniel, who had been looking increasingly uncomfortable as the conversation progressed, nodded quickly. "Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry for the confusion. I'll just finish up here and—" "No." Maya's voice was firm. "Daniel, please don't go." "Maya." Clara's warning tone could have frozen water. "Daniel has work to do and we have business to finish." "Our business is finished," Maya said, standing up straighter. "I've made my choice." "You've made a mistake," Clara corrected coldly. "And now you're going to fix it by choosing one of the 5 qualified candidates." "They're not qualified," Maya said stubbornly. "They are the most successful men in their respective fields." "Success isn't the same as qualification," Maya shot back. "None of them are qualified to be my father." Richard Stone leaned forward with clinical interest. And what exactly do you think qualifies someone to be a father? The question seemed to catch Maya off guard for a moment. She looked around the room, taking in the expensive suits, the Rolex watches, the aura of power and wealth that surrounded the 5 suitors. Then her eyes found Daniel still standing awkwardly by the door, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else in the world. Love, Maya said simply. A father should love his children more than anything else in the world. He should put their happiness before his own success, their needs before his wants. He should be someone they can trust, someone who keeps his promises, someone who shows up when it matters. She paused, looking directly at Clara. Daddy used to say that being rich was just having money, but being wealthy was having people who loved you. These men might be rich, but Daniel is wealthy. The silence that followed was profound. Outside the windows, Manhattan continued its relentless pace, but inside the boardroom, time seemed to have stopped entirely. Clara stared at her daughter, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time in months. When had Maya become so articulate, so thoughtful, so wise? When had she developed such strong opinions about love and family and what mattered in life? The answer was painful in its simplicity. Maya had grown up while Clara was busy building an empire. Maya, Clara's voice was softer now, less commanding. I understand that you care about Daniel, and I'm grateful for his kindness to you. But caring about someone isn't the same as wanting them to be part of our family permanently. Why not? Maya asked. Because Clara struggled to find words that would make sense to a 10-year-old. Because love isn't enough. I loved your father, but love didn't save him when that drunk driver ran a red light. Love doesn't pay for your education or protect you from people who might try to hurt you because of who you are. Love doesn't build the kind of security that will last your entire life. But without love, what's the point of security? Maya asked quietly. The question hit Clara like a punch to the gut. She'd built Hayes Industries into a billion-dollar empire precisely to ensure that Maya would never want for anything, never be vulnerable the way Clara had been as a child, growing up poor in Detroit. But somehow, in all her planning and strategizing and empire building, she'd forgotten to make sure that Maya would be loved. The point, Clara said carefully, is that I won't be around forever. Someday you'll need someone who can stand beside you as an equal. Someone who understands the weight of what you'll inherit and can help you carry it. Daniel understands weight, Maya said quietly. He carries it every day. That's not the same thing, Clara started to say, but Maya cut her off. Isn't it Daniel works 3 jobs to take care of his sick mother? He sends money to his sister so she can go to college. He volunteers at the animal shelter on weekends because he says everything deserves kindness. He knows what it's like to be responsible for other people, to make sacrifices for the people you love. Clara felt a chill run down her spine. How did Maya know so much about Daniel's life? How much time had they been spending together? Maya? Clara's voice was carefully controlled. When exactly have you been having these conversations with Daniel? Maya's chin jutted out defiantly. Whenever I can find him. When you're working late, and I'm supposed to be doing homework, I go find Daniel and help him with his cleaning. He tells me stories about the constellations and I tell him about school. When you're traveling and the nannies are ignoring me, Daniel lets me sit in the maintenance office and do my homework while he fixes things. You've been wandering around the building unsupervised. Clara's voice was rising in alarm. I've been finding the one person in this whole tower who actually cares whether I'm happy or sad, Maya shot back. The accusation landed like a slap. Clara prided herself on being a good mother, on providing for Maya in ways that her own parents never could have imagined. But when was the last time she'd asked Maya if she was happy? This ends now, Clara said firmly. Maya, you will choose one of these 5 men, and Daniel will be reassigned to a different building, effective immediately. You can't do that. Maya's voice cracked with panic. I can and I will, Clara said coldly. I will not have my daughter forming inappropriate attachments to employees. Inappropriate. Maya's voice was getting louder, more desperate. What's inappropriate about someone being nice to me? What's inappropriate about someone treating me like I matter? Because he works for us. Clara snapped, her composure finally cracking. Because there are boundaries, Maya, and you're too young to understand why they're important. I understand perfectly, Maya said, tears starting to well up in her eyes. I understand that you don't want me to care about anyone who can't make you more money or more powerful. I understand that you think love is a weakness that gets in the way of business. I understand that you'd rather I have a stepfather who sees me as a transaction than someone who sees me as a person. That is not what this is about. Clara's voice was loud enough to rattle the windows. Then what is it about? Maya screamed back. Tell me, Mommy. What is it really about? The question hung in the air like a challenge. The 5 suitors shifted uncomfortably in their seats, clearly regretting their involvement in this family drama. Daniel looked like he wanted to sink through the floor. And Clara stood frozen, staring at her daughter, realizing that she didn't have a good answer. What was it about? Was it about Maya's future security, or Clara's need to maintain control? Was it about protecting Maya from a world that would try to use her, or about Clara's own fear of being vulnerable again? Was it about ensuring that Maya had every advantage, or about making sure that Clara never had to face the possibility of losing someone she loved to something as random and meaningless as a car accident? It's about protecting you, Clara said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. From what? Maya asked. From everything, Clara said helplessly. From people who would use you, from circumstances you can't control, from the kind of pain that comes when you let yourself depend on someone who might not always be there. The room went silent again. Even the 5 suitors seemed to recognize that they were witnessing something private and profound. Daddy might not be here anymore, Maya said quietly. But that doesn't mean loving him was a mistake. And it doesn't mean I should stop loving people just because they might leave. Clara felt tears prick at her eyes. The first tears she'd allowed herself since David's funeral. Maya, I love you, Mommy. Maya continued, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. I love you even though you work all the time, and even though you're trying to make me choose someone I don't want. I love you even though you're scared and angry and trying to control everything. But I won't let you make me afraid to love other people too. The words hit Clara like a series of physical blows. When had her 10-year-old daughter become so wise? When had she learned to see through Clara's defenses to the fear underneath? And I love Daniel. Maya continued, turning to look at him with absolute certainty. Not because he can give me things, or because he's perfect, but because he's kind and honest, and he makes me feel like I'm worth caring about just for being me. Daniel's face had gone completely white. Maya, you can't. This isn't. Your mother is right about the boundaries. I'm just the janitor. You're not just anything, Maya said fiercely. You're Daniel, and you're the person I choose. Clara closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on her like a physical force. She'd built an empire, commanded boardrooms full of powerful men, negotiated deals worth hundreds of millions of dollars. But she was being defeated by a 10-year-old girl who refused to compromise on love. When she opened her eyes again, everyone in the room was looking at her, waiting for her response. The 5 suitors were clearly expecting her to put an end to this nonsense and force Maya to make a reasonable choice. Daniel was obviously hoping she'd release him from this impossible situation. And Maya was watching her with a mixture of hope and defiance, waiting to see whether her mother would choose control or trust fear or love. Clara Hayes had built her entire adult life on the principle that emotions were luxuries she couldn't afford. But looking at her daughter's tear-streaked face, she realized that maybe she'd been wrong about what constituted a luxury and what constituted a necessity. "Daniel," Clara said quietly, her voice cutting through the silence like a knife. "Yes, ma'am. What do you think about all this?" Daniel looked like he'd rather be facing a firing squad. "Ma'am, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Maya is a wonderful little girl, and I've enjoyed getting to know her, but I would never presume to think that someone like me could be suitable for someone like her." "Someone like you," Clara repeated. "I'm nobody special, ma'am. I clean offices and fix broken things. I didn't go to college, I don't have money or connections or influence. I'm just a guy trying to get by and take care of his family." "And that makes you nobody special?" Clara asked, her voice surprisingly gentle. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. "It makes me realistic about my place in the world." "Your place in the world," Clara repeated thoughtfully. "And where exactly do you think that is?" "Wherever I can be useful without getting in the way," Daniel said simply. The answer revealed more about Daniel's character than any resume ever could. Here was a man who'd been raised to believe that his worth was determined by his usefulness to others, who'd learned to make himself invisible so as not to be a burden. Clara recognized the type because she'd once been that type, the person who'd grown up poor and learned to be grateful for whatever scraps of opportunity came their way. "Maya," Clara said, not taking her eyes off Daniel. "Can you give us a moment? I'd like to speak with Daniel privately." "Are you going to fire him?" Maya asked suspiciously. "I'm going to have a conversation with him," Clara said. "Sometimes adults need to talk about complicated things without an audience." Maya looked like she wanted to argue, but something in Clara's tone must have convinced her that this wasn't the time. "Okay. But Daniel, you have to promise not to let her talk you out of this." Daniel looked helplessly at Maya. "Sweetheart, your mother knows what's best for you." "No," Maya said firmly. "I know what's best for me. And what's best for me is having you as my father. So promise me you'll at least think about it." "Maya," Daniel started to protest. "Promise me," Maya insisted. Daniel looked into her earnest young face and seemed to melt a little. "I promise I'll think about it." Maya nodded, satisfied. She gathered up her stuffed elephant and walked toward the door, pausing only to look back at the 5 suitors who were still sitting around the conference table like forgotten props in a play. "Thank you for coming," she said politely. "But you can go home now. I won't be choosing any of you." And with that, Maya Hayes walked out of the boardroom, leaving behind a silence so complete that it seemed to have weight and substance. Senator Mitchell was the first to break the quiet. "Well, this has been enlightening. Clara, obviously the child is confused and emotional. When you've sorted this out, please give my office a call." "Same here," Marcus Chen said, already reaching for his phone. "Kids, right? They don't understand how the real world works." One by one, the 5 suitors made their excuses and filed out of the room, clearly eager to distance themselves from what they saw as an embarrassing family drama. Within minutes, Clara and Daniel were alone in the vast boardroom, facing each other across an expanse of polished mahogany. Clara studied Daniel carefully, seeing him clearly for the first time. He was younger than she'd initially thought, probably no more than 32 or 33. His clothes were clean but worn, his hands rough from manual labor. There was something in his face that reminded her of David. Not physically, but something in his expression, a kindness that seemed genuine rather than calculated. "Sit down," Clara said, gesturing to one of the leather chairs. Daniel hesitated. "Ma'am, I really think I should get back to work." "I said sit down." The authority in her voice was unmistakable. Daniel reluctantly took a seat, perching on the edge of the chair, like he was ready to flee at any moment. Clara walked to the window and stood looking out at the city sprawling below them. From this height, the people on the streets looked like ants, insignificant and interchangeable. It was a view that had always given her comfort, reminding her of how far she'd climbed from her humble beginnings. "Tell me about yourself, Daniel," she said without turning around. "There's not much to tell," Daniel replied carefully. "Humor me." Daniel was quiet for a long moment, clearly trying to figure out what Clara wanted to hear. "I'm 33 years old. I grew up in Brooklyn. My father left when I was 12, so my mother raised me and my younger sister on her own. She worked 2 jobs to keep us fed and housed, and she made sure we understood that education and hard work were the only ways out of poverty." "But you didn't go to college?" "No, ma'am. My sister was smarter than me, and there was only enough money for one of us to go. I started working right after high school so she could focus on her studies." Clara turned to look at him. "What does your sister do now?" "She's in her last year of medical school," Daniel said, and for the first time there was pride in his voice. "She's going to be a pediatrician." "And your mother?" Daniel's expression darkened slightly. "She has early onset Alzheimer's. She's in a good facility, but it's expensive. Hence the 3 jobs. "Hence the 3 jobs, Daniel confirmed. Clara returned to her seat at the head of the table, studying Daniel with the same intensity she brought to analyzing potential business acquisitions. "What are your goals, Daniel? Where do you see yourself in 5 years?" Daniel shifted uncomfortably. "I just want to take care of my family and maybe save enough to go to community college part-time. I've always been good with my hands, and I think I might like to learn more about engineering or architecture." "Those are modest goals." "They're realistic goals," Daniel corrected gently. Clara leaned back in her chair, steepling her fingers. "Maya seems to think very highly of you." "Maya's a special kid," Daniel said, and his whole demeanor softened. "She's smart and funny and incredibly kind. She deserves every good thing the world can give her, including a father who can provide for her properly." Daniel's jaw tightened slightly. "Yes, ma'am. She deserves that too." "And you don't think you could provide for her properly?" "I know I couldn't," Daniel said bluntly. "Mrs. Hayes, I live in a 1-bedroom apartment that I share with my mother's nurse when she's there. I drive a car that's older than Maya. I shop at thrift stores and clip coupons and sometimes eat ramen for dinner 3 nights in a row to make ends meet. I can't give Maya the life she's accustomed to, and I would never want to be the reason she had to settle for less." The answer was everything Clara had expected to hear, but somehow it didn't bring her the satisfaction she'd thought it would. Instead, she found herself thinking about David, about the early days of their marriage, when they'd lived in a tiny apartment and eaten ramen themselves, but they'd been happy in a way that Clara sometimes forgot was possible. "What if money weren't an issue?" Clara asked quietly. Daniel looked confused. "Ma'am, what if I told you that money would never be a problem, that Maya would never want for anything, regardless of what you could provide? What would your answer be then?" Daniel was quiet for a long time, clearly thinking through the implications of the question. "It's hard to separate those things," he said finally. "Money might not be everything, but the lack of it affects everything else. It affects where you live, where you go to school, who you meet, what opportunities you have. Maya's going to inherit a fortune someday, and she'll need someone who understands that world, who can help her navigate it. That's not what I asked, Clara said firmly. I asked what you would want if money weren't an issue. Daniel met her eyes directly for the first time since the conversation had started. I'd want to be the kind of father Maya deserves. Someone who puts her first, who shows up for her, who loves her unconditionally. Someone who teaches her that she's valuable just for being herself, not for what she owns or what she can do for other people. The simple honesty of the answer hit Clara like a physical blow. It was everything she'd wanted to hear and everything she'd been afraid to hope for. And what makes you think you could be that person? Clara asked. I don't know if I could be, Daniel admitted, but I know I'd try every single day to live up to what she deserves. I know I'd never stop being grateful for the chance to be part of her life. And I know I'd love her like she was my own daughter, because in every way that matters, she already feels like she is. Clara felt her throat tighten. This was the problem with Daniel. He said things that sounded too good to be true, but when she looked in his eyes, she believed him. Daniel, Clara said carefully, do you have any idea what you'd be getting yourself into? Maya isn't just any little girl. She's going to inherit one of the largest fortunes in America. That comes with scrutiny, pressure, expectations, and dangers that most people can't even imagine. I understand that, Daniel said quietly. Do you? Do you understand that there will be people who try to use you to get to her apple, who will question your motives, your background, your worthiness? Do you understand that every decision you make will be examined and criticized by people who think they know better? Daniel was quiet for a moment. Mrs. Hayes, I've spent my whole life being invisible to people like you. I know what it's like to be looked down on, to be dismissed, to have people assume the worst about me because of where I come from or what I do for a living. But Maya doesn't see me that way. She sees me as someone worth caring about, and that means everything to me. Even if it means giving up your privacy, your anonymity, your simple life. My life isn't simple now, Daniel said with a slight smile. It's complicated and messy and full of challenges. The only difference would be that the challenges would be worth facing, because I'd be facing them for Maya. Clara stood up abruptly and walked back to the window. Outside, the sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the city. She could see her reflection in the glass. A powerful woman in an expensive suit, standing alone in a tower of her own making. There's something else you need to understand, Clara said without turning around. I don't love easily, Daniel. I loved Maya's father, and when he died, it nearly destroyed me. I won't let that happen again, not to me and not to Maya. If you become part of our family, you don't get to leave. You don't get to decide you've made a mistake, or that the pressure is too much, or that you'd rather go back to your simple life. Once you're in for good. I understand, Daniel said simply. Do you? Because I've seen what happens when people underestimate what they're signing up for. The prenups, the investigations into your background, the security protocols, the media attention, it's all real and it's all permanent. Mrs. Hayes, Daniel said quietly, I've been taking care of people my whole life. I know what commitment looks like. If you're asking me whether I'm ready to commit to Maya for the rest of my life, the answer is yes. If you're asking me whether I'm prepared to face whatever comes with that commitment, the answer is also yes. Clara turned to face him again. And if I said no, if I told you that, regardless of what Maya wants, I won't allow this to happen. Daniel's expression didn't change. Then I'd respect your decision and step back. But I'd also hope that someday you might reconsider, because Maya deserves to have someone in her life who loves her the way I do." The quiet confidence in his voice was devastating. Clara had been prepared for arguments, for desperation, for attempts to convince her. She hadn't been prepared for simple acceptance and unwavering devotion to her daughter's happiness. "Why?" Clara asked suddenly. "Why do you care so much about Maya? You barely know her." Daniel smiled, and for the first time since this conversation had started, he looked completely relaxed. "Have you ever met anyone who just fit in your life like they belonged there, even though you'd never imagined them before they showed up?" Clara thought about David, about the way he'd walked into her life during her first year building Hayes Industries, and somehow made everything make sense. "Maya is like that for me," Daniel continued. "From the first day I met her when she was crying on that balcony, I felt like I'd been waiting my whole life to take care of her. Not because of who she is or what she represents, but because of who she is when she's just being herself. She's funny and smart and brave, and she has this way of seeing the world that makes me want to be better than I am." "She's 10 years old," Clara said quietly. "Age doesn't matter when it comes to recognizing someone who changes your life," Daniel replied. "You must know that, or you wouldn't have built all this for her." The observation was uncomfortably accurate. Clara had indeed built her empire with Maya in mind, driven by a fierce love that had motivated every decision she'd made since her daughter's birth. "This is insane," Clara said more to herself than to Daniel. "Yes, ma'am, it probably is," Daniel agreed. "I don't make decisions based on emotion." "No, ma'am, I imagine you don't." "I certainly don't make life-altering decisions based on the whims of a 10-year-old." "No, ma'am." Clara stared at him, frustrated by his calm acceptance of her objections. "You're not arguing with me. Would it help if I did? It might make this easier." Daniel stood up from his chair and walked over to stand near the window, close enough to Clara that she could see the sincerity in his eyes. "Mrs. Hayes," he said quietly, "I'm not going to try to convince you to let me into your family. That's not a decision anyone should have to be talked into. Either you trust me with Maya's happiness or you don't. Either you believe I can be the father she deserves or you don't. But I will say this. I've never wanted anything in my life as much as I want the chance to love your daughter the way she deserves to be loved." Clara felt her carefully constructed defenses crumbling. This man, this janitor with his work-worn hands and his humble dreams, was offering her daughter something that all her money and power couldn't buy: unconditional love. "If I said yes," Clara said slowly, "if I agreed to this insanity, what would you want from me?" "Just the chance to prove that Maya chose well," Daniel said simply. Clara closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the decision settling over her like a heavy blanket. Everything rational in her said this was a mistake, that she should stick with her original plan and choose one of the 5 eminently qualified suitors. But for the first time in years, she found herself listening to something other than rationality. She found herself listening to the memory of Maya's voice saying, "A father should love his children more than anything else in the world." She found herself listening to the echo of David's voice telling her that being wealthy meant having people who loved you. She found herself listening to her own heart, which had been silent for so long that she'd almost forgotten it was there. When Clara opened her eyes again, Daniel was watching her with an expression of patient hope that reminded her so much of Maya that it took her breath away. "This is the stupidest decision I've ever made," Clara said quietly. Daniel's face lit up with a smile that transformed his entire appearance. "Does that mean—" "It means," Clara said, her voice stronger now, that if you hurt my daughter, if you disappoint her, if you ever make her feel like she was wrong to choose you, I will destroy you in ways you can't even imagine." "Yes, ma'am," Daniel said, his smile growing wider. "It means that you'll sign a prenup that will make your head spin, submit to background checks that will examine every moment of your life, and agree to security protocols that will make you feel like you're living in a fishbowl." "Yes, ma'am." "It means that you'll be scrutinized by the media, investigated by people who want to tear you down, and judged by everyone who thinks they know better than a 10-year-old girl." "I understand." Clara studied his face, looking for any sign of doubt or uncertainty. She found none. "And it means," Clara said quietly, "that you'll have a daughter who loves you more than life itself, and well, it means you'll have a family." Daniel's eyes filled with tears that he didn't try to hide. "Thank you," he whispered. Clara nodded curtly, already second-guessing herself, but somehow certain that she was making the right choice. "Don't thank me yet. Wait until you see what you've gotten yourself into." But as she watched Daniel's face, as she saw the pure joy and gratitude written there, Clara found herself thinking that maybe Maya had been right all along. Maybe love was qualification enough. Maybe it was the only qualification that really mattered. The boardroom door burst open, and Maya came flying in, her stuffed elephant clutched in her arms. "Did you say yes?" she asked breathlessly, looking back and forth between Clara and Daniel. Clara looked at her daughter, really looked at her, and saw David's eyes shining with hope and determination. She saw the little girl who'd been brave enough to stand up to some of the most powerful men in America because she knew what she wanted and wasn't afraid to fight for it. "I said yes," Clara confirmed. Maya let out a shriek of joy and launched herself at Daniel, who caught her in a hug that lifted her feet off the ground. Over her daughter's head, Clara watched Daniel close his eyes and hold Maya like she was the most precious thing in the world. And for the first time since David's death, Clara Hayes allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, everything was going to be all right. The euphoria of Maya's victory lasted exactly 48 hours. As Clara watched her daughter bounce around their penthouse apartment, chattering excitedly about wedding plans and whether Daniel would move in right away, a cold knot of dread began forming in her stomach. The rational part of her mind, the part that had built a billion-dollar empire, was screaming that she'd made a catastrophic mistake. By Wednesday morning, Clara's phone was ringing non-stop. Word had somehow leaked about the unconventional boardroom meeting, and the vultures were circling. "Clara, darling," came the honey-sweet voice of Victoria Sterling, Hayes Industries' head of public relations. "We need to talk, immediately." Clara was in her home office trying to focus on quarterly reports while Maya got ready for school, but Victoria's tone sent ice through her veins. "What's the problem, Victoria?" "The problem is that Senator Mitchell's people are already spinning this as a publicity stunt. Marcus Chen's PR team is suggesting you've had some kind of breakdown. And don't get me started on what James Bradford is telling his oil executive friends about the stability of Hayes Industries' leadership." Clara's grip tightened on the phone. She'd anticipated pushback, but not this quickly or this viciously. "And what exactly are they saying? That you're emotionally compromised? That letting a 10-year-old make family decisions reflects poor judgment that could extend to business decisions? That perhaps it's time for the board to consider alternative leadership structures?" The threat was clear as crystal. Clara had built Hayes Industries from nothing, but she didn't own a controlling share. If enough board members lost confidence in her leadership, they could force her out of her own company. "Schedule an emergency board meeting for this afternoon," Clara said curtly. "I'll handle this." "Clara, there's more. The press is already sniffing around. Someone tipped them off about Daniel Cole. They're digging into his background, his family, his finances. By tomorrow, every detail of his life will be splashed across the tabloids. Clara closed her eyes, feeling the walls closing in. She'd been so focused on Maya's happiness that she'd forgotten about the piranha tank that was high society Manhattan. Daniel had no idea what was coming for him. "Handle the press," Clara ordered. "Standard protocol. No comments, refer all inquiries to our legal department. And Victoria, find out who leaked this information. I want names." After hanging up, Clara sat in her office, staring out at the city skyline, feeling like a general who'd just realized she'd walked her army into an ambush. The smart move would be to cut her losses now before the damage spread. She could claim temporary insanity, blame grief over David's death, and choose one of the original suitors. The board would be satisfied, the press would move on to other scandals, and Maya would never forgive her. The thought hit Clara like a physical blow. In 48 hours, her daughter had transformed from a quiet, sad little girl into someone radiant with hope. Maya had trusted Clara to keep her word, to honor her choice. Breaking that trust would do more damage than any hostile takeover attempt. Clara was still wrestling with her options when her assistant's voice came through the intercom. "Mrs. Hayes, there's a Daniel Cole here to see you. He says it's urgent." Clara's stomach dropped. Daniel was supposed to be at work, not showing up at her office, looking panicked. "Send him in." Daniel entered, looking like he hadn't slept, his usually neat appearance disheveled, and his face pale with stress. "Mrs. Hayes, I'm sorry to bother you, but I need to talk to you about what's happening." "Sit down," Clara said, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. "What's wrong?" "Everything," Daniel said, running his hands through his hair. "I got to work this morning and my supervisor told me I was being transferred to a different building, effective immediately. No explanation, just orders from corporate. Then my landlord called and said he'd received inquiries about my lease and was considering not renewing it. My mother's care facility called to say someone had been asking questions about her treatment and our payment arrangements." Clara's jaw clenched. The 5 rejected suitors were moving faster than she'd anticipated, using their connections to squeeze Daniel from every angle. And then Daniel continued, his voice getting tighter. "A reporter showed up at my sister's medical school, started asking her classmates about our family, our finances, whether I'd ever been in trouble with the law. Sarah called me crying, asking what she'd done wrong." The image of Daniel's sister being harassed because of Clara's decision sent a surge of fury through her. These men weren't just attacking Daniel. They were going after everyone he cared about. "Mrs. Hayes," Daniel said quietly, "I think I need to step back from this. For Maya's sake, and for my family's sake." "Absolutely not!" Clara's voice was sharp as a blade. Daniel looked surprised by her vehemence. "Ma'am, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but this is getting out of hand. I can't let the people I love get hurt because I was foolish enough to think I could be part of your world." "You're not stepping back," Clara said firmly, "because the moment you do, these bastards win, and I don't lose to bastards." For the first time since he'd entered her office, Daniel looked confused instead of defeated. "I don't understand." Clara stood up and walked around her desk, her mind already shifting into the strategic mode that had made her one of the most feared businesswomen in America. "Daniel, you're thinking like someone who's been pushed around his whole life. But you're not alone anymore. You're part of my family now, which means you have resources you've never had before." "What kind of resources?" "The kind that can make people very sorry they decided to mess with us," Clara said, with a smile that would have made a shark nervous. She pressed her intercom button. "Victoria, cancel that board meeting. Instead, I want you to set up individual meetings with Senator Mitchell, Marcus, Chen, James Bradford, William Cross, and Richard Stone. Tell them it's regarding their recent business activities and potential legal exposure. Clara, Victoria's voice was cautious. What are you planning? I'm planning to remind some very powerful men why they shouldn't underestimate me, Clara said smoothly. Oh, and Victoria, I want our best private investigators on this. If these men want to play dirty, I need to know exactly how dirty they're willing to get. After hanging up, Clara turned back to Daniel, who was staring at her with a mixture of awe and concern. Mrs. Hayes, I don't want you to start a war because of me. I'm not starting a war, Clara corrected. They started a war when they decided to attack my family. I'm just going to finish it. Your family, Daniel repeated softly. The words had slipped out before Clara could stop them, but as she looked at Daniel's hopeful expression, she realized she meant them. Somewhere in the past 48 hours, this humble janitor had stopped being an outsider and started being someone she was prepared to protect with everything she had. Maya chose you, Clara said simply. That makes you family, and I protect my family. Daniel was quiet for a long moment, clearly struggling to process this sudden shift in his circumstances. What do you need me to do? First, you're going to stop thinking like a victim and start thinking like someone who belongs here, Clara said briskly. Second, you're going to trust me to handle the business side of this situation. And third, you're going to go home to Maya and act like nothing is wrong. She doesn't need to know about any of this ugliness. But what about my job, my landlord, the harassment? Leave all of that to me, Clara said. By the end of the week, everyone who's been pressuring you will have much bigger problems to worry about. Daniel stood up slowly, still looking dazed by the rapid turn of events. Mrs. Hayes, I want you to know that, whatever happens, I'm grateful for what you're doing. But I also want you to be sure that I'm worth fighting for. Clara studied his face, seeing the genuine concern there. He wasn't asking her to fight for him out of selfishness or ambition. He was worried that she might be making a mistake that would cost her more than he was worth. Daniel, Clara said quietly. Yesterday, I watched my daughter stand up to 5 of the most powerful men in America because she knew what she wanted and wasn't afraid to fight for it. She chose you. That tells me everything I need to know about your worth. Daniel's eyes filled with tears that he quickly blinked away. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Clara said with a slight smile. Thank me after you see what I'm capable of when someone threatens my family. After Daniel left, Clara spent the rest of the morning making phone calls that would have terrified most people. By lunchtime, she had enough information to bury all 5 men who were trying to destroy Daniel, and by evening, she was ready to start the counterattack. Senator Mitchell was the first to arrive at her office, his usual political confidence replaced by obvious nervousness. Clara had chosen to meet him in her smallest conference room, the one with no windows and fluorescent lighting that made everyone look slightly ill. Senator, Clara said without preamble as he took his seat. I understand you've been having conversations about my mental fitness and leadership capabilities. Mitchell tried to summon his campaign smile, but it fell flat in the harsh lighting. Clara, I'm sure there's been some misunderstanding. I would never... Please don't insult my intelligence. Clara cut him off smoothly. I have recordings of 3 separate conversations you've had with board members of Hayes Industries questioning my judgment and suggesting that perhaps it's time for a change in leadership. The blood drained from Mitchell's face. Those were private conversations. Nothing is private when you're dealing with people who have better lawyers than you do, Clara said pleasantly. But let's move on to more pressing matters. I'm curious about your relationship with Dmitry Volkov. If Mitchell had looked pale before he now looked like he was about to pass out. I don't know what you're talking about. Clara opened a file folder and spread several photographs across the table. They showed Senator Mitchell entering and leaving a luxury hotel, having dinner with a man who looked distinctly Russian and accepting an envelope that was clearly stuffed with cash. Dmitry Volkov, Clara continued conversationally, is a known associate of several Russian oligarchs who are currently under federal investigation. These photographs were taken 3 weeks ago at the Ritz-Carlton. That envelope you're accepting contains $50,000 in unmarked bills, which I believe violates several campaign finance laws, not to mention potential treason statutes. Mitchell was staring at the photographs like they were poisonous snakes. Where did you get these? Senator, you've been in politics long enough to know that information is power and power has a price. The question is, what's the price of my silence? What do you want? Mitchell's voice was barely a whisper. I want you to call every board member you've spoken to and clarify that you have complete confidence in my leadership. I want you to issue a public statement praising my business acumen and expressing your hope for continued collaboration between the private and public sectors. And I want you to never, ever interfere in my family's affairs again. Mitchell nodded rapidly. Done. Absolutely done. Excellent, Clara said, gathering up the photographs. Oh, and Senator, if I hear so much as a whisper about Daniel Cole or my daughter from anyone in your circle, these photos will be on the front page of every newspaper in America within an hour. Mitchell practically ran out of the conference room, and Clara allowed herself a moment of satisfaction before calling for the next appointment. Marcus Chen strutted in with his usual tech bro arrogance, apparently unaware that his world was about to collapse around him. Clara babe, he said, dropping into his chair like he owned the place. We need to talk about this whole situation with your kid. The optics are terrible and it's reflecting badly on all of us. Interesting perspective, Clara said mildly. Tell me, Marcus, how are the optics on your company's data collection practices? Chen's confident expression flickered slightly. What are you talking about? Clara slid a thick folder across the table. I'm talking about the illegal harvesting of personal data from children's accounts, the sale of that data to foreign governments, and the systematic cover-up that's been going on for the past 18 months. Chen opened the folder, and his face went white as he scanned the documents inside. How did you... This is confidential. Nothing is confidential when you're stupid enough to trust your data security to the lowest bidder, Clara said conversationally. It's amazing what a good hacker can find when they know where to look. You can't prove any of this, Chen said desperately. Can't I? That's funny because the FBI seems to think these documents are quite compelling. In fact, they're planning to execute search warrants on your offices tomorrow morning. Chen's hands were shaking as he closed the folder. What do you want? The same thing I wanted from Senator Mitchell. A complete retraction of everything you've said about my leadership, a public statement of support, and a promise to leave my family alone. And if I do that, you'll call off the FBI. Clara smiled. Marcus, I can't call off the FBI. They make their own decisions based on evidence. But I might be persuaded to lose some of the more damaging documents in this file. Chen nodded frantically. Whatever you want. Just please, good boy, Clara said patronizingly. You can go now. The next 3 meetings followed similar patterns. James Bradford discovered that Clara had evidence of his company's environmental violations that could result in billions in fines. William Cross learned that his investment firm's creative accounting practices had caught the attention of the SEC. Richard Stone found out that his pharmaceutical company's safety testing had been falsified for years. By the end of the day, all 5 men had agreed to Clara's terms, and the pressure on Daniel had mysteriously evaporated. His job transfer was canceled, His landlord stopped asking questions, and the reporter's harassment of his sister ended abruptly. But Clara knew the victory was temporary. Powerful men didn't like being humiliated, and they would be looking for ways to strike back. She needed to move quickly to consolidate her position before they could regroup. That evening, Clara arrived home to find Maya and Daniel in the kitchen, working together to make dinner. Maya was standing on a step stool, carefully stirring something on the stove, while Daniel watched her with the kind of protective attention that David used to give her. "Mommy?" Maya called out when she saw Clara. "Daniel is teaching me how to make his grandmother's pasta sauce. Did you know that the secret ingredient is a little bit of coffee?" "Coffee," Clara repeated, raising an eyebrow at Daniel. "Just a tablespoon," Daniel said with a slight smile. "It brings out the depth of the tomatoes without making it taste like coffee." "Daddy used to put a little bit of wine in his sauce," Maya said thoughtfully. "Do you think we could try that next time?" The casual mention of David should have been painful, but somehow it wasn't. Instead, Clara found herself thinking that David would have liked Daniel, would have appreciated his gentle way with Maya and his obvious devotion to her happiness. "I think that sounds like a wonderful idea," Clara said, and she meant it. During dinner, Maya chattered happily about her day at school, her plans for the weekend, and her excitement about the upcoming wedding. Neither Clara nor Daniel mentioned the events of the day, but Clara caught Daniel shooting her grateful looks when Maya wasn't watching. After Maya went to bed, Clara and Daniel found themselves alone in the living room, sharing a glass of wine and watching the city lights twinkle below. "So," Daniel said quietly, "I take it your meetings went well today?" "They went exactly as planned," Clara confirmed. "Should I ask what you did to those men?" Clara considered the question. "Let's just say that very powerful people often have very big secrets, and sometimes those secrets can be used to encourage better behavior." Daniel was quiet for a moment. "Mrs. Hayes, I need you to know that I never wanted this to become a war. I never wanted people to get hurt because of me." "People were always going to get hurt," Clara said matter-of-factly. "The only question was whether it would be us or them. I prefer it to be them. But what about the cost? What about the enemies you've made?" Clara looked at Daniel's concerned face and felt something shift inside her chest. Here was a man who was worried about her well-being, about the price she might pay for protecting him. When was the last time anyone had cared about what her battles cost her? "Daniel," Clara said softly, "I've been fighting battles my entire life. I fought to get out of poverty, to build my company, to protect Maya after David died. The difference is that this time I'm fighting for something that matters more than money or power or reputation." "What's that?" Daniel asked. "I'm fighting for my daughter's happiness," Clara said simply. "And for the first time in months, she's truly happy." Daniel set down his wineglass and turned to face her fully. "Mrs. Hayes," "Clara," she corrected. "If we're going to be family, you should probably call me Clara." "Clara," Daniel said carefully, "I want you to know that I understand what you've risked for us, for me. And I promise you that I will spend every day for the rest of my life trying to be worthy of that sacrifice." The sincerity in his voice was overwhelming. Clara had made her decision to support Daniel because of Maya, but somewhere along the way, she'd started to care about him for his own sake. He was a good man, genuinely good in a way that was rare in her world. "You already are worthy," Clara said quietly. "Maya saw it, and now I see it too." Daniel's eyes filled with tears that he didn't try to hide. "Thank you for everything." Clara nodded, feeling an unexpected lump in her throat. Just don't make me regret this, okay? Never, Daniel said with absolute conviction. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, both lost in their own thoughts. Outside Manhattan hummed with its usual energy, but inside the penthouse there was a sense of peace that Clara hadn't felt in months. "Clara," Daniel said eventually. "Yes." "What happens now, I mean, with the wedding and everything? Maya keeps talking about it like it's going to happen tomorrow." Clara smiled slightly. "Well, first we'll need to get through the media circus. Once word gets out about our engagement, every tabloid in America is going to want the story. Then there's the legal paperwork. Prenups, adoption documents, security clearances. And somewhere in there, we'll probably want to actually plan a wedding." "Adoption documents," Daniel repeated. "If you're going to be Maya's father, it should be legal as well as emotional," Clara said practically. "Unless you have objections to that." Daniel looked like he'd been hit by lightning. "You want me to legally adopt Maya?" "I want Maya to have the security of knowing that you'll always be her father no matter what happens," Clara said. "Legal adoption makes that possible." "What if something happens to you?" Daniel asked quietly. The question hung in the air between them. Clara had been avoiding thinking about it, but Daniel was right to bring it up. If Clara died, what would happen to Maya? Without legal adoption, Daniel would have no rights, no way to continue caring for her. "If something happens to me," Clara said carefully, "I want Maya to stay with you. I want her to be raised by someone who loves her more than anything else in the world." Daniel was quiet for so long that Clara began to worry she'd overstepped. Maybe he wasn't ready for that level of responsibility. Maybe the reality of potentially raising Maya alone was too overwhelming. "That's a huge responsibility," Daniel said finally. "Yes, it is," Clara agreed. "Maya's going to inherit a fortune someday. She'll need guidance, protection, education about how to handle that kind of wealth and power." "Yes, she will." Daniel looked out at the city sprawling below them. "I'm not sure I'm qualified to help her navigate that world." Clara felt her heart sink. Maybe she'd been wrong about Daniel. Maybe when faced with the full scope of what he'd be taking on, he would decide it was too much. "But," Daniel continued, "I love her enough to learn. I love her enough to surround her with advisors and experts who can teach her what I can't. I love her enough to make sure she becomes the kind of person who uses her advantages to help others, not just to accumulate more advantages for herself." Relief flooded through Clara so strongly that it left her dizzy. "You're sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," Daniel said firmly. Clara nodded, feeling something tight in her chest finally relax. "Then we'll make it official. All of it." "When?" Daniel asked. "Soon," Clara said. "Before our enemies have time to regroup and launch another attack." Daniel frowned slightly. "Do you think they'll try again?" "I think powerful men don't like being beaten by a 10-year-old girl and a janitor," Clara said dryly. "But I also think they'll be much more careful about how they approach us in the future. Because you have dirt on all of them. Because I have dirt on all of them, and because they now know that attacking my family is a very expensive mistake," Clara confirmed. Daniel was quiet for a moment. "This is all so surreal. A week ago I was just trying to pay my bills and take care of my mother. Now I'm engaged to one of the most powerful women in America, and about to become the stepfather to an heiress." "Having second thoughts?" Clara asked, trying to keep her voice light. "Not about Maya," Daniel said immediately. "Never about Maya. But I'd be lying if I said I wasn't terrified about everything else." The honesty was refreshing. Clara was so used to people telling her what they thought she wanted to hear that Daniel's candor was almost shocking. "Terrified of what specifically?" Clara asked. "Of disappointing you, of not being good enough for Maya, of making mistakes that hurt the people I love," Daniel said quietly. "Of losing myself in all of this wealth and power and forgetting who I am." Clara studied his face, seeing the genuine vulnerability there. "Daniel, do you know why I ultimately said yes to this engagement? Because Maya chose me." "Partly," Clara agreed. "But also because you're terrified of those things. Someone who wasn't good enough wouldn't worry about being good enough. Someone who might lose themselves would never think to worry about losing themselves." Daniel considered this. "So my fear is actually a good sign." "Your fear tells me that you understand the gravity of what you're taking on," Clara said. "And your willingness to take it on anyway tells me that you're brave enough to handle it." "I hope you're right," Daniel said softly. "I'm always right," Clara said with mock arrogance, and was rewarded with Daniel's laugh. They talked for another hour, working through practical details and emotional concerns, and by the time Clara went to bed, she felt more optimistic about the future than she had in months. Daniel wasn't just a good man. He was a thoughtful man, someone who considered the implications of his actions and took his responsibilities seriously. Maya had chosen well, and Clara was finally beginning to believe that she had too. But as Clara lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling and listening to the distant sounds of the city, she couldn't shake the feeling that the real challenges were still ahead of them. She'd won the first battle, but the war was far from over. Somewhere out there, 5 very powerful men were nursing their wounds and plotting their revenge. And when they struck back, Clara would need to be ready with everything she had. Because now it wasn't just about protecting her company or her reputation. Now it was about protecting her family. All of it, including the humble janitor who'd somehow stolen her daughter's heart and was slowly stealing hers as well. The war Clara had predicted came sooner than expected, and it came from a direction she hadn't anticipated. 3 weeks after her meetings with the 5 rejected suitors, Clara was reviewing quarterly projections when Victoria Sterling burst into her office without knocking, something that had never happened in their 10-year working relationship. "Clara, we have a problem," Victoria said. Her usually perfect composure cracked wide open. "A big one." Clara looked up from her reports, immediately alert. Victoria's face was pale, and she was clutching a tablet like it contained nuclear launch codes. "What kind of problem?" "The kind that could destroy everything you've built," Victoria said, setting the tablet on Clara's desk. "Look at this." The screen showed the homepage of Manhattan Insider, one of the most vicious gossip publications in the city. The headline made Clara's blood turn to ice. "Billionaires breakdown. Hayes Industries CEO forces daughter to choose new daddy from company staff." But it was the sub-headline that made Clara's hands shake. "Exclusive inside sources reveal Clara Hayes' disturbing family auction." Clara scrolled through the article with growing horror. Someone had leaked detailed information about the boardroom meeting. Not just the basic facts, but intimate details about the conversation, verbatim quotes from Maya, and damaging speculation about Clara's mental state. The article painted her as an unfit mother who had subjected her traumatized daughter to a bizarre selection process while pressuring vulnerable employees into inappropriate relationships. "How?" Clara's voice was barely a whisper. "How did they get this level of detail?" "Someone was recording," Victoria said grimly. "The audio quality is too good to be from a hidden phone. This was professional equipment." Clara felt the walls closing in around her. Only 7 people had been in that boardroom herself: Maya, Daniel, and the 5 suitors. Maya certainly hadn't recorded anything, and Daniel didn't have access to professional recording equipment, which meant one of the 5 men had planned this from the beginning. "There's more," Victoria continued, her voice getting tighter. The story broke simultaneously on 6 different platforms: Manhattan Insider, City, Confidential, Business Weekly, Mom's Truth, and 2 major blogs. This was coordinated. Clara's phone started ringing before Victoria finished speaking. The caller ID showed her lawyer's office, followed immediately by 3 board members, 2 major investors, and Maya's school principal. Each call would be worse than the last. "Don't answer any of them yet," Clara said, her mind racing through damage control scenarios. "First, I need to know who did this." "The recording had to come from one of the suitors," Victoria said. "But which one?" Clara was already pulling up security footage on her computer. Hayes Tower had cameras in every hallway, elevator, and common area. If someone had brought recording equipment into the building, there would be evidence. "Get our security chief up here immediately," Clara ordered, "and call our crisis management team. We're going to need them." But even as Clara spoke, she knew this was bigger than a typical PR crisis. The story had been crafted to hit her in every vulnerable spot: her parenting, her business judgment, her mental fitness, and her treatment of employees. Someone had studied her weaknesses and weaponized them. Her office door burst open again, and this time it was Daniel. His face was white with panic, and he was holding his phone like it was a live grenade. "Clara, I've been getting calls all morning," he said breathlessly. "Reporters, photographers, people wanting to know if it's true that you coerced Maya into choosing me. They're saying you exploited your daughter for a publicity stunt." Clara's heart clenched as she saw the devastation in Daniel's eyes. He'd walked into her world believing in the possibility of love and family, and now he was discovering what it felt like to be torn apart by the media machine. "Daniel, sit down," Clara said gently. "We're going to handle this." "How?" Daniel asked, slumping into a chair. "How do you handle something like this? They're making it sound like I'm some kind of predator who took advantage of a grieving child." Before Clara could answer, her phone rang again. This time, the caller ID showed Maya's school, and Clara's blood went cold. She answered immediately. "Mrs. Hayes," came the careful voice of Principal Morrison. "I'm calling because we've had some incidents this morning. Several parents have called expressing concerns about Maya's well-being, and there are photographers gathering outside the school." "What kind of incidents?" Clara's voice was dangerously quiet. "Some of the other children have been asking Maya questions about the newspaper stories. She's become quite upset and is asking to speak with you." Clara was already grabbing her keys. "I'll be there in 15 minutes. Do not let anyone near my daughter except her teacher and yourself." "Of course, Mrs. Hayes. But I should mention that we've also received calls from Child Protective Services. They're requesting a meeting to discuss Maya's home environment." The phone slipped from Clara's hand and clattered onto her desk. Child Protective Services. Someone had weaponized her own daughter against her, turning Clara's decision to honor Maya's choice into evidence of unfit parenting. "Clara," Daniel was on his feet, alarmed by her reaction. "What's wrong?" "They're going after Maya," Clara said, her voice hollow with shock. "Someone called CPS and reported us for child endangerment." Daniel's face went white. Can they take her away?" "Not if I have anything to say about it," Clara said, steel returning to her voice. "Victoria, cancel everything on my schedule. Daniel, you're coming with me. We're going to get Maya, and then we're going to war." The drive to Maya's school was a nightmare of flashing cameras and shouted questions. Reporters had surrounded the building like vultures, and Clara had to use her security team to create a corridor to the front entrance. Through it all, Daniel sat beside her in stunned silence, clearly overwhelmed by the intensity of the media attention. "Is this what your life is always like?" he asked quietly. "No," Clara said grimly. "This is what my life is like when someone wants to destroy me." They found Maya in Principal Morrison's office, sitting in an oversized chair with her stuffed elephant clutched against her chest. Her eyes were red from crying, and she looked smaller and more vulnerable than Clara had seen her since David's death. "Mommy." Maya launched herself into Clara's arms, and Clara held her tight, breathing in the familiar scent of her daughter's shampoo and feeling her heart break. "It's okay, sweetheart," Clara murmured. "Everything's going to be okay." "The other kids are saying mean things," Maya sobbed into Clara's shoulder. "They're saying you made me pick Daniel like he was a toy, and that you don't really love me." Clara felt murderous rage flow through her veins. Whoever had orchestrated this attack had known exactly how to use Maya's innocence against her. They'd turned her daughter's moment of triumph into a source of shame and confusion. "Maya, look at me," Clara said gently, pulling back so she could see her daughter's face. "Do you remember what happened in that boardroom? Do you remember making your choice?" Maya nodded, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. "And do you remember why you chose Daniel?" "Because he loves me," Maya said quietly. "And because he listens to me and makes me feel important." "That's right," Clara said firmly. "You made that choice because you're smart and brave and you know what love looks like. Nobody forced you to do anything. You stood up to 5 powerful men and chose what was best for you." "But the newspapers are saying—" "The newspapers are lying," Daniel interrupted, moving to kneel beside Maya's chair. "Maya, sweetheart, sometimes people tell lies about other people when they're angry or jealous. That's what's happening here." "But why would they lie about us?" Maya asked, her voice small and confused. Clara and Daniel exchanged a look over Maya's head. "How do you explain to a 10-year-old that powerful adults sometimes behave worse than children? How do you tell her that her happiness has become a weapon in someone else's war? Because some people don't like it when children make their own choices," Clara said carefully. "They think children should just do what adults tell them to do, even if it doesn't make them happy." Maya considered this with the seriousness that had always made her seem older than her years. "So they're mad at me for choosing Daniel." "They're mad at all of us," Daniel said gently. "But Maya, I need you to know something very important. No matter what anyone says, no matter what lies they tell you. Choosing me was the best thing that ever happened to me. I love you, and I'm proud to be your father." "Even though it's causing all this trouble?" Maya asked. "Especially because it's causing all this trouble," Daniel said with a slight smile. "If someone is willing to fight this hard to stop us from being a family, it means we must be pretty special." Maya managed a small smile in return. "We are special, aren't we?" "The most special family in the world," Clara confirmed, kissing the top of Maya's head. Principal Morrison cleared her throat diplomatically. "Mrs. Hayes, I hate to interrupt, but we need to discuss the practical situation. The photographers outside are quite aggressive, and several parents have expressed concerns about their children's safety." "What are you suggesting?" Clara asked, though she already knew. Perhaps it would be best if Maya took a few days off school until this situation calms down. Clara wanted to argue, wanted to insist that Maya shouldn't have to hide because of other people's lies. But one look at her daughter's exhausted face made the decision for her. "Fine," Clara said tightly. "But I want it on record that Maya is being kept home for her protection, not because there's any validity to these accusations." "Of course, Mrs. Hayes," I'll make sure that's documented. The trip home was another gauntlet of cameras and shouted questions. Maya pressed her face against Clara's shoulder, trying to block out the chaos, while Daniel sat rigid with tension. Once they were safely in the penthouse elevator, Maya finally spoke. "Mommy, are they going to take me away from you?" Clara's heart stopped. "Who told you that, sweetheart?" "I heard some of the reporters shouting questions about it. They said something about people coming to check if I'm safe." Clara knelt down to Maya's eye level, taking her small hands in her own. "Maya, listen to me very carefully. No one is going to take you away from me. No one. I promise you that. But what if they try? Then they'll learn why it's a very bad idea to mess with the Hayes family," Clara said with fierce determination. "We protect each other. Remember, you, me, and Daniel. We're a team now." Maya nodded, but Clara could see the fear still lurking in her eyes. The innocence that had allowed Maya to stand up to 5 powerful men had been damaged by this media assault, and Clara wasn't sure it could ever be fully repaired. Once they were safely aside the penthouse, Clara's phone immediately started ringing again. This time she answered, and the next few hours became a blur of crisis management calls. Her lawyers assured her that the CPS complaint was frivolous, but would require investigation. Her public relations team outlined strategies for fighting back against the media narrative. Her board members demanded emergency meetings to discuss her leadership. Through it all, Daniel stayed with Maya, helping her with homework and playing board games, providing the kind of steady, calming presence that Clara wished she could offer, but couldn't while fighting fires on multiple fronts. "Clara," Victoria said during one of her calls, "we've identified the source of the recording." Clara's attention snapped into focus. "Who?" "William Cross. Security footage shows him entering the building with a briefcase that contained professional recording equipment. He planted a device in the boardroom before the meeting started." Clara felt cold fury settle in her chest. Of all the 5 suitors, Cross had seemed the most reasonable, the most genuinely interested in Maya's welfare. To discover that he'd been planning to betray them from the beginning was particularly galling. "Get me everything you can find on Cross," Clara ordered. "Financial records, business dealings, personal relationships, parking tickets. I want it all." "Already on it," Victoria said. "But Clara, there's something else. The coordinated media blitz. It wasn't just Cross. We're seeing fingerprints from all 5 men. They're working together now." Clara closed her eyes, feeling the magnitude of what she was facing. 5 of the most powerful men in America had joined forces to destroy her family. They'd turned her daughter's happiness into a scandal and weaponized the very media that had once celebrated Clara's success. "Then we fight all 5 of them," Clara said simply. "Clara, be realistic. You can't take on that much power simultaneously. The smart move is to negotiate, find a compromise." "There is no compromise when it comes to my daughter," Clara cut her off. "These men made this personal when they attacked Maya. Now they're going to learn what happens when you go to war with a mother protecting her child." That evening, after Maya had gone to bed, Clara and Daniel sat in her home office planning their counterattack. Daniel was quieter than usual, clearly struggling with the guilt of having brought this chaos into their lives. "You know," Daniel said finally, "maybe I should step back. Maybe if I disappeared for a while, this would all blow over." "Absolutely not," Clara said immediately. "Clara, be practical. Maya's being hurt because of me. If I remove myself from the equation—" "If you remove yourself from the equation, they win," Clara said fiercely. "And Maya loses the father she chose. Is that what you want?" "I want what's best for Maya," Daniel said quietly. "Then stay and fight," Clara said. Because what's best for Maya is having a father who doesn't run away when things get difficult. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. You really think we can win this? Clara looked at him across her desk, this humble man who'd somehow become the center of a media storm through no fault of his own. He could have walked away at any point. Should have walked away if he'd had any sense of self-preservation. But he was still here, still worried about Maya's welfare above his own comfort. Daniel, do you know what I see when I look at you? Clara asked. A janitor who's gotten in way over his head. Clara smiled slightly. I see a man who's willing to face down the most powerful people in America because a little girl chose him to be her father. I see someone who's more concerned about Maya's happiness than his own safety. I see the kind of person who's worth fighting for. Daniel's eyes filled with tears that he didn't try to hide. I love her so much, Clara. I love both of you. I just don't want my love to be the thing that destroys your lives. Your love isn't destroying anything, Clara said firmly. Their greed and pride and inability to accept losing to a 10-year-old, that's what's causing this destruction. But we're going to stop it. How? Clara pulled out a thick folder and spread its contents across her desk. By reminding them why they shouldn't have picked a fight with me in the first place. The documents contained financial records, email communications, meeting, transcripts, and photographs that painted a devastating picture of corruption and illegal activity. Clara had spent the afternoon compiling evidence that could destroy all 5 men's careers and potentially land them in federal prison. This is what happens when you have the resources to dig deep enough, Clara explained. Cross has been embezzling from his clients' accounts for years. Chen's company is being investigated for treason-level security breaches. Mitchell's Russian connections go far deeper than campaign finance violations. Bradford's companies have been covering up environmental disasters that have killed people. And Stone's pharmaceutical trials have been falsified to hide deadly side effects. Daniel stared at the evidence spread across the desk. This is enough to destroy them. This is enough to destroy them 10 times over, Clara confirmed. The question is whether to use it defensively or go on the attack. What's the difference? Clara leaned back in her chair, considering her options. Defensive means we use this to force them to back down, to stop their media campaign and leave us alone. It's clean, quiet, and effective. And offensive means we destroy them completely. We release everything to law enforcement and the media simultaneously. We make sure they never have the power to threaten anyone again. Daniel was quiet for a long time, clearly wrestling with the moral implications. What would Maya want us to do? The question caught Clara off guard. In all her years of business warfare, she'd never considered what her daughter might want her to do. She'd always assumed that protecting Maya meant making the ruthless choice, the strategic choice, the choice that eliminated threats most efficiently. Maya would want us to do the right thing, Clara said slowly. And what's the right thing? Clara looked at the evidence again, thinking about all the people who had been hurt by these men's illegal activities. Cross's embezzlement had destroyed retirement funds for dozens of families. Chen's security breaches had exposed millions of people to identity theft and worse. Mitchell's corruption had undermined democracy itself. Bradford's cover-ups had poisoned communities and killed children. Stone's falsified trials had put deadly drugs on the market. The right thing, Clara said quietly, is to make sure they can never hurt anyone else again. Daniel nodded slowly. Then that's what we do. Clara began organizing the documents, preparing to hand them over to federal investigators and journalists simultaneously. It would be the nuclear option, mutually assured destruction for her enemies, but also guaranteed protection for her family. There's no going back from this, Clara warned. Once we do this, we'll have made enemies of some very powerful people. Our lives will never be quiet again. They weren't going to be quiet anyway, Daniel pointed out. At least this way we're fighting for something bigger than ourselves. Clara looked at him with newfound respect. Somewhere along the way, this humble janitor had developed the strategic thinking of a general and the moral compass of a saint. Maya had chosen well indeed. Then we do this together, Clara said, extending her hand to Daniel. Daniel shook it firmly. Together. The next morning brought a development that Clara hadn't expected. She was preparing to release the damaging evidence when Victoria called with urgent news. Clara, you need to see this, Victoria said, sending a link to Clara's phone. The link led to a live news conference where Senator Mitchell was standing at a podium, looking haggard and defeated. Behind him stood the other 4 suitors, their faces grim with resignation. Ladies and gentlemen, Mitchell began, his voice shaky. I'm here today to issue a formal apology to Clara Hayes and her family for the unconscionable invasion of privacy and character assassination that we orchestrated. Clara's mouth fell open as Mitchell continued confessing to the recording, the coordinated media campaign, and the false CPS report. One by one, the other 4 men stepped forward to offer their own apologies and admissions of guilt. What the hell is happening? Clara asked Victoria. I don't know, Victoria said, sounding equally confused. This wasn't our doing. Clara watched in stunned silence as the 5 men essentially destroyed their own reputations on live television. They admitted to criminal activity, unethical behavior, and a coordinated conspiracy to harm a 10-year-old child. It was a complete and total surrender. Mrs. Hayes, came a familiar voice from behind Clara. She turned to find Maya standing in the doorway of her office, still in her pajamas and holding her stuffed elephant. Maya, sweetheart, you should be sleeping, Clara said. I couldn't sleep, Maya said simply. I've been thinking about those men and why they're so angry at us. Oh, baby, you don't need to worry about... I want to tell them something, Maya interrupted. I want to explain why I chose Daniel, so they'll understand and stop being mean. Clara's heart clenched. Her daughter's impulse was to solve this conflict with communication and understanding, to appeal to the better angels of men who had none. Maya, sometimes people are too angry to listen to explanations, Clara said gently. But maybe they just don't understand, Maya insisted. Maybe if I told them about how Daniel makes me feel safe and loved and important, they'd realize that choosing him was the right thing to do. Clara looked at her daughter's earnest face and felt something shift inside her chest. Maya wasn't naive. She was hopeful. She believed in the possibility of redemption and understanding, even in the face of cruelty and betrayal. You know what, sweetheart? Clara said, making a decision that surprised herself. Maybe you're right. Maybe they do need to hear from you. Really? Maya's face lit up with hope. Really? Clara confirmed, reaching for her phone. But we're going to do it the right way on our terms. Within 2 hours, Clara had arranged for a live television interview with one of the city's most respected journalists. The interview would take place in their penthouse, with Maya, Clara, and Daniel all participating. It would be Maya's chance to tell her story in her own words, without manipulation or sensationalism. As they prepared for the interview, Daniel looked nervous. Are you sure about this? Clara putting Maya in front of cameras after everything that's happened. Maya wants to speak, Clara said simply, and I think the world needs to hear what she has to say. The journalist Sarah Chen arrived with a small crew and set up in the penthouse living room. She was known for her tough but fair reporting, and Clara trusted her to treat Maya with appropriate respect. Maya, Sarah said gently as they began filming, There's been a lot of talk about the choice you made. Can you tell us in your own words why you chose Daniel to be your new father? Maya looked directly into the camera, with the poise of someone much older than her 10 years. I chose Daniel because he loves me for who I am, not for what I can give him. When I was sad about my daddy dying, Daniel didn't try to fix it or make it go away. He just sat with me and let me be sad. And when I was happy about something little like learning to tie my shoes, he was happy too. But Maya, Sarah continued carefully, some people have said that your mother forced you to make this choice. Is that true? No, Maya said firmly. Mommy wanted me to choose someone, but she let me pick who I wanted. She could have just told me who to pick, but she didn't. She let me decide because she trusts me to know what's best for me. And what made Daniel different from the other men your mother introduced you to? Maya's face grew thoughtful. The other men talk to Mommy about me, but Daniel talks to me. The other men know things about money and business and important stuff, but Daniel knows things about being kind and patient and making people feel better when they're scared. Some people think you're too young to make such an important decision, Sarah said. What would you say to them? Maya looked directly into the camera again, her young voice carrying a wisdom that made Clara's throat tight with pride. I would say that age doesn't matter when you know what love feels like, Maya said simply. I know Daniel loves me because of how he treats me when nobody's watching. I know he'll be a good father because he already is one. And I know I made the right choice because I'm happier now than I've been since Daddy died. The interview continued for another 30 minutes, with Maya answering every question with honesty and insight that left even the experienced journalist visibly moved. When it was over, Clara knew that her daughter had accomplished something remarkable. She'd turned a media narrative about exploitation and manipulation into a story about love and family and the wisdom of children. That evening, as they watched the interview air on national television, Clara's phone began ringing with a very different kind of call. Instead of crisis management and damage control, she was fielding requests for interviews from other news programs, offers of support from family advocacy groups, and messages from parents around the country who had been inspired by Maya's courage. You know, Daniel said, as they watched Maya's image on the television screen, she's going to change the world someday. She already has, Clara said quietly, thinking about how her daughters had changed her own world in ways she was still discovering. The next morning brought the final surprise in what had been a week of unexpected developments. Clara was reviewing the overwhelmingly positive response to Maya's interview when Victoria called with news that left her speechless. Clara, you're not going to believe this, Victoria said, but William Cross just called. He wants to arrange a private meeting to discuss a personal matter. What kind of personal matter? Clara asked suspiciously. He wouldn't say over the phone, but he sounded different, humbled. He asked if you would be willing to meet with him alone, just the two of you. Clara's first instinct was to refuse. Cross had orchestrated the attack on her family, had used her daughter's innocence against her. She owed him nothing, certainly not a private audience. But something in Victoria's tone made her reconsider. Different how? Like a man who's seen something that changed his perspective, Victoria said carefully. Clara, I've dealt with powerful men trying to manipulate their way out of consequences before. This didn't sound like that. Clara thought about Maya's words during the interview, about the possibility of understanding and redemption. Maybe her daughter's optimism was rubbing off on her. Set up the meeting, Clara said finally. But not in my office, somewhere neutral. And I want security present. Are you sure about this? No, Clara admitted. But maybe that's exactly why I should do it. The meeting was scheduled for the next day at a small restaurant in Midtown, chosen for its private dining rooms and discreet atmosphere. Clara arrived to find William Cross already waiting, and she was shocked by his appearance. The polished investment banker she remembered had been replaced by someone who looked like he hadn't slept in days. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his usually perfect hair was disheveled, and his eyes held a haunted quality that Clara had never seen before. "Mrs. Hayes," Cross stood as she entered. "Thank you for agreeing to see me." Clara took her seat across from him, studying his face carefully. "I have to admit, Mr. Cross, I'm curious about what you could possibly have to say to me after everything that's happened." Cross was quiet for a long moment, clearly struggling with how to begin. "Mrs. Hayes, I owe you an apology that goes far deeper than the public statement I made yesterday." "Go on," Clara said neutrally. "When we first approached you about marrying your daughter, I thought I understood what was happening," Cross said slowly. "I thought it was a business arrangement, a strategic alliance that would benefit both parties. I treated Maya like she was part of a corporate acquisition." Clara remained silent, waiting to see where this was going. But watching her interview last night, Cross's voice cracked slightly. Seeing the intelligence and wisdom and pure love in that little girl's eyes, I realized what a monster I'd become. "Mr. Cross, please let me finish." Cross interrupted. "I have a daughter, Mrs. Hayes. She's 8 years old, and she's the light of my life. Watching Maya speak about love and family and making choices that matter, I realized that if someone had done to my daughter what I did to yours, I would have destroyed them without a second thought." Clara felt her anger beginning to soften slightly, though she remained cautious. "What exactly are you saying?" "I'm saying that Maya is right about love being the most important thing," Cross said quietly. "I'm saying that I was so focused on winning a business competition that I forgot we were talking about a child's happiness. I'm saying that I'm ashamed of myself in ways I didn't know were possible." Cross reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick envelope. "These are the original recordings from the boardroom meeting, along with all the notes and strategy documents from our campaign against you. I want you to have them." Clara took the envelope, surprised by its weight. "Why?" "Because I want to make sure this never happens again," Cross said simply. "Because I want to do whatever I can to undo the damage I've caused. And because Maya deserves better than to have her story twisted by adults who've forgotten what really matters." Clara opened the envelope and found not just recordings and documents, but also what appeared to be financial statements and legal documents. "What are these?" she asked. "Details of my contribution to a trust fund I've established for Maya's education," Cross said. "It's not much, only $50 million. But I wanted to do something concrete to show my support for her future." Clara's eyebrows rose. $50 million was hardly not much by anyone's standards, except perhaps the ultra-wealthy. "Mr. Cross, this is completely unnecessary." "Maybe," Cross agreed. "But it's also completely heartfelt. Maya taught me something about the difference between being rich and being wealthy. I want to help make sure she grows up to be wealthy in all the ways that matter." Clara studied Cross's face, looking for any sign of manipulation or hidden agenda. She found none, just genuine remorse and a desire to make amends. "There's something else," Cross continued. "I've spoken with the other 4 men. We've all agreed to issue a joint statement taking full responsibility for our actions and expressing our support for your family. We want to make sure that Maya never has to deal with criticism about her choice again." "And what do you want in return?" Clara asked, still suspicious. "Nothing," Cross said simply. "Well, that's not entirely true. I want to be able to tell my own daughter that when I made a terrible mistake, I did everything in my power to fix it. I want her to be proud of me the way Maya is proud of you and Daniel." Clara felt tears prick at her eyes. This was not what she had expected from this meeting. She'd come prepared for manipulation threats or desperate attempts at negotiation. She hadn't been prepared for genuine contrition and a father's love for his own child. "Mr. Cross," Clara said quietly, "Maya has a saying that she learned from her father. She says that people deserve second chances if they're willing to earn them. Are you willing to earn yours?" "Yes," Cross said, without hesitation. "Whatever it takes." Clara nodded slowly. "Then perhaps we can find a way forward that serves everyone's interests, including Maya's." They spent the next hour working out the details of Cross's redemption plan. He would use his financial expertise to help establish educational and charitable foundations in Maya's name. He would leverage his business connections to create opportunities for other children to have their voices heard in family decisions. And he would serve as an advocate for family rights and children's welfare in his professional and personal circles. When Clara returned home that evening, she found Maya and Daniel in the kitchen again, this time working on homework together. Maya was struggling with a math problem, and Daniel was patiently walking her through it, step by step. "How was your meeting, Mommy?" Maya asked, looking up from her workbook. "It was educational," Clara said carefully. "Maya, what would you say if I told you that Mr. Cross wanted to apologize to you personally?" Maya considered this seriously. "I would say that apologizing is good, but only if he really means it." "And how would you know if he really meant it?" "By whether he changes how he acts," Maya said simply. "Daddy always said that apologies are just words, unless they come with different choices." Clara smiled once again, amazed by her daughter's wisdom. "Would you be willing to meet with him if he wanted to apologize?" "Only if Daniel can be there too," Maya said firmly. "Daniel is my father now, and fathers protect their children from people who might hurt them." Daniel looked up from the math problem, his eyes bright with emotion. "Maya, I promise you that I will always protect you from anyone who wants to hurt you." "I know," Maya said simply, as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. Clara watched the interaction between her daughter and the man who had become her husband in everything but legal paperwork, and felt a sense of peace settle over her that she hadn't experienced in months. They had survived the storm, emerged stronger, and proven that love really could triumph over power and greed. The meeting with Cross took place the following week in the penthouse with Maya, Clara, and Daniel all present. Cross arrived with his own 8-year-old daughter Emma, who clung shyly to her father's hand. "Maya," Cross said formally, "I want to apologize to you for the hurt and confusion I caused. I was wrong to try to interfere with your choice, and I'm sorry that my actions made you sad or scared." Maya studied Cross carefully, then looked at his daughter. "Emma, do you love your daddy?" Emma nodded, still hiding behind her father's leg. "And does he love you?" Maya continued. "Very much," Emma whispered. Maya turned back to Cross. "Then you understand why I chose Daniel, and you understand why what you did was wrong." "I do understand," Cross said quietly. "And I want to spend the rest of my life making sure that other children get to make the same kind of choice you made with the same kind of support." Maya nodded approvingly. "That's a good apology, the kind that comes with different choices." Clara watched as her daughter taught a grown man about forgiveness and redemption, and realized that somewhere along the way, the student had become the teacher. Maya had learned everything Clara had tried to teach her about strength and independence, but she'd also learned things that Clara was still discovering about grace and wisdom and the transformative power of love. As the evening wound down and Cross prepared to leave with his daughter, Maya asked one final question. Mr. Cross, do you think Emma will get to choose her own father someday, if something happens to you? Cross looked down at his daughter, then back at Maya. If something happens to me, Emma will have a choice about who takes care of her. Because you've taught me that children are smart enough to know what love looks like. Maya smiled, satisfied with the answer. Good. Every child should get to choose love. As Clara tucked Maya into bed that night, her daughter asked the question that had been weighing on both their minds. Mommy, when are you and Daniel going to get married for real? Clara had been so focused on fighting external battles that she'd almost forgotten about the wedding they'd planned. Soon, sweetheart. Very soon. Good, Maya said sleepily. Because I want Daniel to be my real father before anything else happens to try to take him away. Clara kissed her daughter's forehead, marveling at the strength and wisdom contained in such a small package. Nothing is going to take Daniel away from us, Maya. I promise you that. I know, Maya said with absolute confidence, because we're a family now and families protect each other. As Clara turned off the lights and left Maya's room, she found Daniel waiting in the hallway, clearly having overheard the conversation. She's right, you know, Daniel said quietly. We should make it official before anything else tries to tear us apart. Clara looked at this man who had become so much more than she'd ever expected, who had proven himself worthy of her daughter's love and her own trust in ways she was still discovering. How does next weekend sound? Clara asked. Daniel's face lit up with a smile that could have powered the entire city. Next weekend sounds perfect. And as they stood in the hallway outside Maya's room planning their future together, Clara realized that somewhere in the midst of all the chaos and conflict, she'd found something she thought she'd lost forever. A family built on love rather than obligation, choice rather than circumstance, and hope rather than fear. Maya had chosen well, and now Clara was finally ready to embrace that choice with her whole heart. The wedding preparations began immediately, but not in the way Clara had originally envisioned. Instead of the elaborate society affair she'd always assumed she'd have for her second marriage, Maya insisted on something different, something that reflected who they really were as a family, rather than what the world expected them to be. I want it to be beautiful, but not scary, Maya explained as they sat in the penthouse living room, surrounded by wedding planning books that Clara's assistant had delivered. I want it to feel like love, not like a business meeting. Daniel laughed, flipping through a magazine filled with over-the-top wedding venues. Maya, some of these places look like they're designed to host peace treaties between nations. Exactly, Maya said, pointing at a particularly ostentatious ballroom. That's not what love looks like. Love looks like... She paused, searching for the right words. Love looks like when you made me pancakes in the shape of elephants last Sunday, Daniel. Or when Mommy reads me stories even when she's tired from work. Love looks like home. Clara felt her throat tighten with emotion. Her daughter was right, as usual. The elaborate society weddings Clara attended were performances designed to display wealth and status. But this wedding was different. It was a celebration of a family that had chosen each other against all odds. So where do you think we should have it? Clara asked gently. Maya's eyes lit up. Here in our home where we're happiest. We could have it on the terrace with all the city lights, and everyone we love could be there, and it would feel like the most special place in the world because it's ours. Daniel reached over and ruffled Maya's hair affectionately. I think that sounds perfect. What do you think, Clara? Clara looked around their living room, imagining it filled with flowers and music and the people who mattered most to them. It would be intimate rather than grand, meaningful rather than impressive. It would be exactly what their unconventional family deserved. I think, Clara said slowly, that you're both absolutely right. This is where we became a family, so this is where we should make it official. The next few days flew by in a whirlwind of planning that felt more like preparing for a celebration than orchestrating a business merger. Maya threw herself into every detail with the enthusiasm of someone who'd finally found something to be genuinely excited about. She chose white roses and baby's breath for the flowers because they reminded her of the constellations Daniel had shown her. She insisted on string lights because they looked like stars. She even designed the menu around Daniel's favorite comfort foods and Clara's childhood memories of her grandmother's cooking. "This is the happiest I've seen her since David died," Clara confided to Daniel one evening as they watched Maya carefully arranging centerpieces in the dining room. "She's not the only one," Daniel said quietly. "I never thought I'd have a family like this. I never thought I deserved one." Clara turned to study his profile as he watched Maya work. "Daniel, can I ask you something personal?" "Of course." "Have you ever been in love before? I mean really in love?" Daniel was quiet for a long moment. "Once," he said finally. "Her name was Sarah. Not my sister, a different Sarah. We were together for 3 years. I thought we were going to get married. What happened?" "She wanted a different life than I could give her," Daniel said simply. "She wanted someone with ambition, someone who dreamed bigger than just getting by. She said I was content with too little." Clara felt a pang of sympathy for this woman who'd let Daniel go. She was wrong. "Was she?" Daniel asked. "I mean, look at where I was when Maya found me. 33 years old, working 3 jobs, just to pay my mother's medical bills, living in a 1-bedroom apartment with no prospects for anything better. Maybe Sarah was right to want more." "Daniel," Clara said firmly, "you were taking care of everyone you loved, sacrificing your own dreams, to make sure your family was provided for. That's not settling for too little. That's choosing what matters most." "But what if I don't have bigger dreams?" Daniel asked. "What if this? Having a family, taking care of the people I love, finding small moments of happiness. What if that's all I've ever wanted?" Clara looked at him with newfound understanding. "Then you're the richest man I know." Daniel smiled, but there was still uncertainty in his eyes. "Clara, I need you to know that I'm not marrying you to gain access to your world. I'm not looking to become some kind of society husband or business partner. I just want to be Maya's father and your, well, whatever you need me to be." "What I need you to be," Clara said softly, "is exactly who you are. Nothing more, nothing less." The conversation was interrupted by Maya's excited voice from the dining room. "Mommy!" "Daniel, come see what I figured out." They found Maya standing in front of a mirror holding her flower girl dress up against herself and beaming with pride. It was a simple white dress with tiny pearl buttons and a sash that matched the color of her eyes. "I look like a real bride's daughter," Maya said happily. "Do you think Daddy would like it?" The mention of David sent a familiar pang through Clara's chest, but this time it was accompanied by something she hadn't expected, a sense of peace. David would have loved seeing Maya so happy. He would have approved of Daniel, would have been grateful that Clara had found someone who could love their daughter with the same fierce devotion that had defined his own parenting. "I think," Clara said carefully, "that Daddy would be very happy to see you so excited about our family." Maya nodded seriously. "I think so too. And I think he'd like Daniel because Daniel makes us feel safe and loved, just like Daddy did." Daniel knelt down to Maya's level, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "Maya, I want you to know that I'm not trying to replace your father. Nobody could do that. I just want to love you and take care of you the way he would have wanted." I know, Maya said simply. That's why I chose you. The simplicity and certainty of her answer left both adults speechless. Here was a 10-year-old who understood complex emotional truths that many adults spent lifetimes trying to figure out. As the week progressed, Clara found herself dealing with logistics she'd never had to consider for a society wedding. Instead of coordinating with caterers who specialized in 7-course formal dinners, she was working with a local restaurant that could provide comfort food that would make their guests feel welcome rather than intimidated. Instead of hiring a classical quartet, Maya had requested a small band that could play both love songs and music that would make people want to dance. Instead of sending engraved invitations to hundreds of business associates, they were personally calling the few dozen people who truly mattered to them. Mrs. Hayes, Daniel said one afternoon, as they reviewed the guest list. There's something I need to ask you about. What's that? My family, Daniel said carefully. My mother's condition has been getting worse lately, and I'm not sure she'll understand what's happening. My sister Sarah will be there, but Mom might be confused or upset by all the activity. Clara could see the conflict in Daniel's face. His desire to have his mother present at his wedding, warring with his concern about disrupting the celebration or causing her distress. Daniel, Clara said gently, this is your wedding too. If you want your mother there, we'll make whatever accommodations necessary to ensure she's comfortable. It might mean having a nurse present, and she might not remember who I am or why we're celebrating, Daniel warned. Then we'll have a nurse present, and we'll celebrate the fact that she raised an incredible son, whether she remembers it or not, Clara said firmly. Daniel's eyes filled with gratitude. Thank you. That means everything to me. Family is family, Clara said simply. We don't leave people behind just because they're inconvenient. The guest list itself told the story of their unconventional journey. There was Victoria Sterling, Clara's PR director, who had become more friend than employee over the years. There was Principal Morrison from Maya's school, who had become an unexpected ally during the media crisis. There was Dr. Patricia Williams, the family therapist who had helped Maya process her grief over David's death. There was Miguel Santos, the building's head of security, who had always been kind to Maya and had gone out of his way to protect Daniel during the worst of the media attention. Most surprisingly, there was William Cross and his daughter Emma. Maya had insisted on inviting them after Cross's heartfelt apology, saying that people who were truly sorry deserved to celebrate with the people they'd hurt. Are you sure about this, Mo? Clara had asked when Maya suggested adding the Crosses to the guest list. Daddy always said that forgiveness isn't about forgetting what people did wrong, Maya replied. It's about giving them a chance to do better. Mr. Cross is trying to do better. And indeed, Cross had proven his sincerity in the weeks following his apology. He'd established the Maya Hayes Foundation for Children's Advocacy, donated substantial funds to organizations supporting family rights, and had become an unexpected champion for children's voices in custody and adoption proceedings. His transformation from adversary to ally had been one of the most surprising developments in their entire story. The night before the wedding, Clara found herself unable to sleep. She stood at her bedroom window, looking out at the city lights and thinking about the journey that had brought them to this moment. A year ago, she'd been a widow focused solely on building her business empire and protecting her daughter. She'd never imagined that a chance encounter between Maya and a janitor would lead to this, a second chance at love and a family built on choice rather than circumstance. A soft knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. Come in, she called softly. To her surprise, it was Daniel, looking as wakeful as she felt. I hope I'm not disturbing you. I couldn't sleep either. Wedding nerves, Clara asked with a slight smile. Something like that, Daniel said, moving to stand beside her at the window. Clara, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Of course. Daniel was quiet for a moment, clearly struggling with how to phrase his question. Are you marrying me because Maya chose me or because you actually want to marry me? The question hit Clara like a physical blow. In all their planning and preparation, they'd focused so much on making Maya happy and building their family that they'd never explicitly discussed their feelings for each other. That's a fair question, Clara said quietly, and you deserve an honest answer. She turned to face him, fully studying his face in the dim light from the city below. When this all started, I was marrying you because Maya chose you. I was honoring her decision and trying to give her the father she wanted. Daniel nodded clearly, bracing himself for disappointment. But somewhere along the way, Clara continued, that changed. Watching you with Maya, seeing how you put her needs before your own, comfort, witnessing your integrity and kindness even when you were under attack, I fell in love with you for my own reasons. Daniel's eyes widened with surprise and hope. I'm marrying you tomorrow because I can't imagine my life without you in it, Clara said firmly. I'm marrying you because you make me want to be a better person, a better mother, a better human being. I'm marrying you because when I think about growing old, I want to do it with someone who sees the world the way you do. And how do I see the world? Daniel asked softly. Like it's full of possibilities for kindness and connection and love, Clara said. Like people matter more than profits, like family is worth fighting for, like small gestures of care can change everything. Daniel reached for her hands, holding them gently in his work-roughened ones. Clara, I need you to know that I love you, not because you're wealthy or powerful, or because you can provide for Maya, but because you're fierce and protective and brave enough to change your entire life for your daughter's happiness. Even though I'm complicated and demanding and probably not the easiest person to live with, Clara asked. Especially because of those things, Daniel said with a smile. Easy isn't interesting, Clara. You're the most interesting person I've ever met. They stood together in the quiet of Clara's bedroom, holding hands and looking out at the city that had brought them together, both finally admitting to feelings they'd been dancing around for weeks. So tomorrow, Clara said softly, we're not just getting married for Maya's sake. Tomorrow, Daniel confirmed, we're getting married because we choose each other. The wedding day dawned clear and bright, with the kind of crisp autumn weather that made Manhattan look like a postcard. Clara woke to find Maya already dressed in her flower girl dress, carefully arranging rose petals in a small basket. You're up early, sweetheart, Clara observed. I wanted to make sure everything was perfect, Maya said seriously. This is the most important day in our family's life. Clara's throat tightened with emotion. Maya, I want you to know how proud I am of you. None of this would have happened if you hadn't been brave enough to choose love over convenience. I'm proud of you too, Mommy, Maya said simply. You could have made me choose someone safe and boring, but you trusted me to know what was best for us. The morning flew by in a blur of final preparations. The florist arrived with arrangements that transformed their penthouse into a garden oasis. The caterers set up stations throughout the living areas, filling the space with the sense of comfort food and celebration. The string quartet that Maya had requested took their positions on the terrace, ready to provide a soundtrack of love and joy. Clara's own preparations were more emotional than logistical, as her stylist helped her into her wedding dress, an elegant champagne-colored gown that was sophisticated without being ostentatious. She found herself thinking about David and the life they'd built together, about Maya and the future they were creating, about Daniel and the love she'd never expected to find again. Mrs. Hayes, her stylist said gently, you look radiant. Clara looked at herself in the mirror and was surprised by what she saw. Instead of the carefully controlled businesswoman she usually presented to the world, she saw someone softer, more open, more genuinely happy than she'd been in years. A knock on her bedroom door interrupted her thoughts. "Clara," came Daniel's voice. "I know it's bad luck to see the bride before the ceremony, but Maya has something she wants to give you." "Just a minute," Clara called, grabbing a robe to cover her dress. When she opened the door, she found Daniel and Maya waiting in the hallway, both looking nervous and excited. "Maya has a surprise for you," Daniel said with a smile. Maya stepped forward holding a small jewelry box in her hands. "Mommy, this was Daddy's. I asked Daniel to help me turn it into something special for today." Clara's hands shook as she opened the box. Inside was David's wedding ring, which had been transformed into a pendant on a delicate chain. Engraved on the back were the words, "Always with us," in David's familiar handwriting. "Maya," Clara whispered, tears streaming down her face. I wanted Daddy to be part of today too," Maya said simply. "Daniel said that love doesn't end when people die, it just changes shape. So now Daddy's love can be with us while we celebrate the new love in our family." Clara looked at Daniel, who was watching her with gentle understanding. "This was your idea." "Maya's idea," Daniel corrected. "I just helped make it happen. She wanted to make sure that honoring her father didn't mean forgetting him." Clara knelt down to Maya's level, carefully fastening the chain around her neck. "Thank you, sweetheart. This is the most beautiful gift I've ever received." "Now Daddy can walk you down the aisle," Maya said happily. As the afternoon approached, their guests began to arrive. Clara watched from her bedroom window as people she cared about filled her home with laughter and conversation. Victoria Sterling was deep in discussion with Dr. Williams about children's resilience. Miguel Santos was teaching William Cross's daughter Emma a card trick, while Cross himself listened intently to Daniel's sister Sarah talking about her medical residency. Principal Morrison was admiring the flower arrangements with Daniel's mother, who seemed lucid and happy, despite her usual confusion. "It's time," Victoria announced, appearing in Clara's doorway with Maya at her side. The ceremony itself was simple but profound. Clara walked down an aisle created by their guests in the living room, with Maya scattering rose petals ahead of her, and Daniel waiting at the end with an expression of wonder and love that took her breath away. The officiant, a family court judge who had become a friend over the years, spoke about the courage it takes to build a family based on choice rather than obligation, about the wisdom of children and the transformative power of love. When it came time for the vows, Clara found herself speaking words she'd never planned, but that came straight from her heart. "Daniel," she said, her voice steady despite her tears. "6 months ago, I thought I knew everything about love and family and what my life was supposed to look like. Then you came along and proved me wrong about everything except what matters most. That love is a choice we make every day, not just a feeling we have sometimes." Daniel's own vows were equally heartfelt. "Clara and Maya, you've given me a family I never dared to dream of, and a purpose I never knew I was looking for. I promise to love you both with everything I have, to protect your happiness above my own comfort, and to never forget that the greatest privilege of my life is being chosen by you." But it was Maya who provided the most moving moment of the ceremony. When the judge asked if anyone had anything to add, Maya stepped forward with the confidence of someone who had learned that her voice mattered. "I just want everyone to know," Maya said, her young voice carrying clearly through the room, "that sometimes the best things happen when you're brave enough to choose love over what other people think you should choose. Daniel and Mommy chose each other because they love me and because they love being a family. And I chose Daniel because he has the kindest heart of anyone I've ever met. That's how you know someone will be a good father. Not because of what they can buy you, but because of how they make you feel loved, just for being yourself. There wasn't a dry eye in the room as Maya spoke, and when she finished, the applause was thunderous. Even William Cross was openly weeping his own daughter Emma, holding his hand, and smiling up at Maya with obvious admiration. The reception that followed was everything Maya had hoped for: intimate, joyful, and filled with genuine celebration rather than social obligation. Guests mingled freely, sharing stories and laughter that reflected the unusual journey that had brought them all together. Daniel's mother, despite her confusion, seemed to understand that something wonderful was happening, and spent the evening smiling and accepting congratulations from people who were genuinely happy to meet her. As the evening wound down, Clara found herself standing on the terrace with Daniel watching their guests through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Maya was inside dancing with Emma Cross and giggling over some shared secret, her flower girl dress slightly wrinkled from all the celebration. "We did it," Daniel said softly, wrapping his arms around Clara from behind. "We did," Clara agreed, leaning back against his chest. "Though I have to admit it feels a little surreal. 6 months ago, if someone had told me I'd be married to my building's janitor and deliriously happy about it, I'd have had them committed. And if someone had told me I'd be married to one of the most powerful women in America and feeling like the luckiest man alive, I'd have thought they were insane," Daniel replied. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching Maya through the window and marveling at the chain of events that had led them to this moment. "Daniel," Clara said eventually, "what happens now? I mean, what does our life look like going forward?" "I don't know," Daniel admitted. "I've never been married to a billionaire CEO before. I assume there are protocols and expectations I don't know about." Clara turned in his arms to face him. "The only expectation that matters is that we keep putting our family first. Everything else, the business obligations, the social requirements, the public appearances, all of that is secondary to Maya's happiness and our life together. And what about your work? Your company, I don't want you to feel like you have to change who you are because of me." Clara smiled, thinking about how much she'd already changed because of him and Maya, and how much happier those changes had made her. "Daniel, do you remember what Maya said about love changing the shape but not disappearing?" "Yes." "I think the same thing is true about identity," Clara said thoughtfully. "I'm still the CEO of Hayes Industries. I'm still ambitious and driven and protective of what I've built. But now I'm also someone's wife and someone's mother in a way that feels more intentional and meaningful than it ever did before." "So you don't regret giving up your original plans, the strategic marriage, the business alliance, all of that?" Clara looked through the window at Maya, who was now showing Emma how to fold napkins into flower shapes, her face bright with the joy of teaching someone something new. "Daniel," Clara said firmly, "Maya taught me that the best plans are the ones that leave room for love to surprise you. I thought I was planning her future, but it turns out she was planning mine." The sound of laughter from inside drew their attention back to their guests. Maya had apparently convinced several adults to join her in an impromptu dance lesson, and the sight of serious business people attempting to follow a 10-year-old's choreography was both hilarious and heartwarming. "She's going to run the world someday," Daniel observed with obvious pride. "She already is," Clara replied. "She just doesn't know it yet." As the evening came to an end and their guests began to leave, Clara found herself surrounded by well-wishers and people expressing their amazement at the transformation in her family. Victoria Sterling pulled her aside for a private moment. "Clara," Victoria said, "I've known you for 10 years, and I've never seen you this happy. Not even with David, if I'm being honest. It's different with Daniel, Clara agreed. With David, I was young and building my life. With Daniel, I'm choosing to rebuild it around what really matters. Maya was right to choose him, Victoria said simply, and you were right to trust her choice. William Cross approached as Victoria moved away, his daughter Emma in tow. Mrs. Hayes, Clara, I wanted to thank you again for allowing us to be part of this celebration. Thank you for proving that people can change, Clara replied. Maya was right about second chances being worth giving. She's an extraordinary child, Cross said, watching Maya say goodbye to the other guests with the poise of someone much older. You and Daniel are raising someone who's going to change the world. We're not raising her to change the world, Clara corrected gently. We're raising her to be herself. If that happens to change the world, that's just a bonus. Cross nodded thoughtfully. That's exactly the kind of wisdom that made me realize how wrong I was about your family. As the last guests left and Maya finally went to bed exhausted but exhilarated from the day's celebrations, Clara and Daniel found themselves alone in their transformed penthouse. The flowers and decorations remained, but the catering equipment had been cleared away, leaving them in a space that felt both familiar and completely new. So, Daniel said, helping Clara out of her wedding shoes. How does it feel to be Mrs. Daniel Cole? Clara paused, considering the question. She'd kept her own name professionally, of course, but the idea of being part of a family unit again, of having someone to share the weight of decisions and responsibilities, felt both liberating and terrifying. It feels like coming home, Clara said finally, like I've been holding my breath for months and can finally exhale. Even though everything is going to be different now, especially because everything is going to be different, Clara said firmly. Daniel, for the first time since David died, I'm not afraid of the future. I'm excited about it. Daniel pulled her into his arms, holding her close in their quiet living room. I love you, Clara Cole. I love you too, Daniel Cole, Clara replied, marveling at how natural the words felt. As they prepared for bed in what was now truly their shared home, Clara reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. It had begun with a child's grief and a mother's desperation to fix something that couldn't be fixed through money or power. It had continued through conflict and controversy that had tested their resolve and their commitment to each other. And it had culminated in this. A family built on choice and love and the radical belief that sometimes the best decisions come from listening to your heart instead of your head. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and adjustments as they learned to navigate their life together. There would be business decisions to make, family dynamics to balance, and the ongoing work of raising a daughter who was wise beyond her years, but still ultimately a 10-year-old child who needed guidance and protection. But tonight, as Clara fell asleep in her husband's arms, in a house filled with flowers and the lingering warmth of celebration, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years: complete and total peace. Maya had chosen well, Clara had chosen to trust that choice, and Daniel had chosen to rise to the challenge of loving them both. They were a family now, officially and irrevocably bound together, not by obligation or convenience, but by the conscious decision to choose love over fear, hope over cynicism, and each other over the safer but lonelier alternatives. And in the morning, they would wake up ready to face whatever came next, secure in the knowledge that they would face it together. 3 years had passed since that fateful day in the boardroom, when Maya had pointed past 5 of the most powerful men in America to choose the janitor who had saved her stuffed elephant. Now Clara stood once again at the floor-to-ceiling windows of Hayes Tower. But this time she wasn't alone. Daniel was beside her, reviewing architectural plans for the new Hayes Children's Advocacy Center, while Maya, now 13, and somehow even more determined than she'd been at 10, was across the room leading a video conference with young activists from around the world. "The thing about adults," Maya was saying to her laptop screen, her voice carrying the same confidence that had once faced down senators and oil executives, "is that they sometimes forget that being young doesn't mean being wrong. We see things they can't see because we haven't learned to be afraid of change yet." Clara smiled, listening to her daughter coordinate what had become a global movement for children's rights in family court decisions. The Maya Hayes Foundation, originally established by William Cross as an apology, had grown under Maya's guidance into something neither of them had anticipated: a powerful advocacy organization that had already influenced legislation in 12 states. "Mrs. Cole," came Victoria Sterling's voice over the intercom. "There's someone here to see you. She says it's about Maya." Clara exchanged a glance with Daniel. Unexpected visitors asking about Maya always made them both nervous, even though the media attention had largely died down after their marriage. "Send her up," Clara said, moving away from the window. A few minutes later, Victoria escorted in a woman Clara didn't recognize. Well-dressed, professional-looking, probably in her 40s, with the kind of purposeful bearing that suggested government work. "Mrs. Cole, Mr. Cole," the woman said, extending her hand. "I'm Dr. Amanda Chen, and I work for the United Nations Children's Fund. I'm here to discuss a rather unusual opportunity." Maya looked up from her laptop, immediately alert to the presence of a stranger. "Are you here because of the foundation?" Dr. Chen smiled at Maya with the kind of respect that Clara had learned to recognize, the look adults wore when they realized they were in the presence of someone extraordinary, regardless of her age. "In a way, yes," Dr. Chen said. "Maya, your work with the Children's Advocacy Center has caught international attention. The UN is developing a new initiative focused on children's rights in family law globally, and we'd like you to serve as our youth ambassador." The room went completely silent. Clara felt her heart stop as she processed what Dr. Chen was suggesting. Maya, who had just turned 13, was being asked to represent children's interests on an international stage. What exactly would that involve? Daniel asked, his protective instincts clearly activated. Travel to different countries to study their family court systems, speaking at international conferences, working with lawmakers to develop child-centered policies, Dr. Chen explained. It would be a significant commitment, but Maya's unique perspective, having been through the system herself and then advocating for other children, makes her an ideal candidate. Maya had gone very still, her young face serious as she processed the implications. "Would I be the youngest person to ever do something like this?" "By far," Dr. Chen confirmed. "Which is exactly why we need you. Adults have been making decisions about children's welfare for centuries, but we've rarely asked children themselves what they think would work best." Clara felt a familiar mixture of pride and terror. Her daughter had somehow become exactly what the world needed: a voice for children who had no voice. But the thought of 13-year-old Maya traveling internationally, dealing with complex political situations, and shouldering that kind of responsibility was overwhelming. "I need to think about this," Maya said carefully. "And I need to talk to my parents." Dr. Chen nodded. "Of course. This isn't a decision to make lightly. Take all the time you need." After Dr. Chen left, the three of them sat in Clara's office in stunned silence. Finally, Maya spoke. "You think I'm too young, don't you?" Clara and Daniel exchanged one of the wordless communications that had become natural after 3 years of marriage. They were thinking the same thing, that Maya was simultaneously too young for this responsibility and the only person qualified to handle it. "Maya," Clara said carefully, "it's not about being too young. It's about making sure you're choosing this for the right reasons." "What do you mean?" Daniel leaned forward in his chair. Sweetheart, you've been advocating for children's rights since you were 10 years old. But this would be different. This would be giving up a lot of your own childhood to help other children. Are you sure that's what you want? Maya was quiet for a long time, clearly thinking through the implications. Can I tell you something? When I chose Daniel that day in the boardroom, I wasn't just choosing a father for myself. I was choosing to prove that children can make good decisions about their own lives. Every kid who reads about what happened to us, every child who gets to have a say in their custody situation because of the laws we've changed, they're all connected to that one moment when I decided to trust my own heart. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. Her daughter had grown up to be everything Clara had hoped for and more. Someone who understood that privilege came with responsibility, that power should be used to help others, that individual choices could have global impact. But Maya, Clara said gently, you're 13. You should be worrying about homework and friends, and what dress to wear to school, dances, not international policy and children's welfare systems. Maya smiled, and in that smile Clara saw echoes of the determined 10-year-old who had stood up to 5 powerful men. Mommy, do you remember what you told me after the wedding? You said that sometimes the best plans are the ones that leave room for love to surprise you. I remember. Well, I think the same thing is true about growing up, Maya said thoughtfully. Sometimes the best childhoods are the ones that leave room for purpose to find you, even if it comes earlier than expected. Daniel reached over and took Maya's hand. Maya, if you decide to do this, you know your mom and I will support you completely. But we also want to make sure you're not taking this on because you feel obligated to help everyone else. I'm not, Maya said firmly. I'm considering it because I've learned something about myself over the past 3 years. I'm happiest when I'm fighting for something that matters. And right now, nothing matters more to me than making sure other kids get the same chance I got. The chance to have their voices heard when adults are making decisions about their lives. Clara looked at her daughter, really looked at her, and saw not just the little girl who had once clung to a stuffed elephant, but a young woman who had found her calling in life. It was both heartbreaking and inspiring to realize that Maya had outgrown the simple family dynamics they'd built and was ready to take on the world. There's something else to consider, Clara said slowly. If you accept this position, you'll be in the public eye again. There will be scrutiny, criticism, people who think you're too young or unqualified, or being manipulated by adults with their own agendas. Let them think that, Maya said with a shrug that reminded Clara powerfully of herself. I've been dealing with people underestimating me since I was 10. The difference is that now I know how to use their low expectations as an advantage. Daniel laughed despite his concerns. Where did you learn to be so strategic? I learned from watching you both, Maya said simply. Mommy taught me that you can't let other people's opinions determine your choices. Daniel taught me that the most important thing is staying true to who you are even when it's difficult. And you both taught me that family means supporting each other's dreams, even when those dreams are scary. Clara felt her last reservations crumble. Maya wasn't being manipulated or pressured into this opportunity. She was embracing it because it aligned with everything she'd learned about herself and her purpose in the world. If you decide to do this, Kyung, Clara said finally, we'll need to set some ground rules. You're still 13, which means your education comes first. Your safety is non-negotiable and you don't make any major decisions without consulting us. And, Daniel added, you remember that you can change your mind at any time. If this becomes too much, or if you decide you want a more normal teenage experience, we'll support that decision too. Maya nodded seriously. I understand. And I want you both to know that I'm not trying to grow up too fast or leave you behind. I just want to use the platform we accidentally created to help other kids who don't have the advantages I have. That evening, as they sat around the dinner table in their penthouse, a tradition they'd maintained religiously for 3 years, the conversation naturally turned to Maya's decision. "You know," Daniel said, passing the salad to Maya, "when I first met you, I never imagined I'd be having conversations about international diplomacy and children's rights advocacy with a 13-year-old. When I first chose you," Maya replied with a grin, "I never imagined you'd be the kind of father who could help me think through decisions about representing children at the United Nations." Clara watched the exchange with wonder. The relationship between Maya and Daniel had evolved into something beautiful and complex, part father-daughter, part mentor-student, part mutual admiration society. Daniel had never tried to replace David in Maya's memory, but he'd carved out his own irreplaceable space in her heart. "Maya," Clara said carefully, "if you decide to take this position, what do you hope to accomplish?" Maya set down her fork and considered the question seriously. "I want to change the conversation about children in family court. Right now, adults talk about what's best for the child, without ever asking the child what they think would be best. I want to create systems where kids have real input into decisions about their own lives." "That's a big goal," Daniel observed. "It's supposed to be big," Maya said. "Remember what you told me about how the most important things are worth fighting for, even when they're difficult? Well, this is worth fighting for." Clara felt a surge of pride so intense it almost took her breath away. Her daughter had internalized every lesson about courage and conviction that Clara had tried to teach her, but she'd also developed her own moral compass that was even stronger than Clara's. "There's something I need to tell you both," Maya continued, her voice growing more serious. "I've been getting letters from kids all over the world, children who heard about our story and wanted to share their own experiences with family court systems that didn't listen to them." Clara's eyebrows rose. "How many letters?" "Thousands," Maya said quietly. "From every continent except Antarctica. Kids who were placed with relatives who didn't want them, because a judge thought blood relationships were automatically better. Kids who were separated from siblings because adults couldn't figure out how to keep families together. Kids who wanted to live with loving foster families but were forced to go back to biological parents who hurt them." The weight of what Maya was describing settled over the table like a heavy blanket. Clara had known intellectually that their story had resonated with people around the world, but she hadn't fully grasped the scope of the problem her daughter had accidentally highlighted. "Maya," Daniel said gently, "that's a huge burden for you to carry." "That's exactly why I want to accept the UN position," Maya said firmly. "I can't help all those kids individually, but maybe I can help change the systems that failed them." Clara realized that this conversation wasn't really about whether Maya should accept the UN position. It was about acknowledging that Maya had already accepted it in her heart, and they were just catching up to her decision. "When do you need to give Dr. Chen an answer?" Clara asked. "Next week," Maya said. "But I've already decided. I want to do this." Daniel nodded slowly. "Then we'll make it work. Whatever support you need, whatever accommodations have to be made, we'll figure it out together. As a family," Clara added, reaching across the table to squeeze Maya's hand. The next few months were a whirlwind of preparation unlike anything the Cole family had experienced. Maya had to undergo security clearances, cultural sensitivity training, and intensive education about international law and diplomacy. Clara had to restructure her business commitments to accommodate frequent travel, while Daniel worked with Maya's school to develop a flexible curriculum that would allow her to continue her education while fulfilling her UN responsibilities. The first major test came when Maya was invited to address the General Assembly about children's rights in family law. Clara and Daniel sat in the gallery watching their 13-year-old daughter stand at a podium that had hosted world leaders and Nobel Prize winners, speaking with a poise and conviction that left seasoned diplomats visibly moved. Distinguished delegates, Maya began, her young voice carrying clearly through the vast hall. I stand before you today not as an expert in international law or child psychology, but as someone who lived through the experience of having adults make life-changing decisions about my future without consulting me about what I wanted or needed. Clara felt tears streaming down her face as Maya told their story. Not the sensationalized version that had dominated headlines 3 years ago, but the real story of a grieving child who had been brave enough to speak up for what she believed in. The most important lesson I learned, Maya continued, is that children are not just the subjects of family law. We are stakeholders in our own lives. We have insights about our needs, our relationships, and our futures that adults often overlook because they assume that age equals wisdom and youth equals ignorance. The applause that followed Maya's speech was thunderous, but Clara barely heard it. She was too busy marveling at the transformation of her daughter from a sad 10-year-old clutching a stuffed elephant to a 13-year-old advocating for children's rights on the world's most important stage. She's incredible, Daniel whispered, his own eyes bright with tears. She's ours, Clara whispered back, still hardly believing it was true. After the speech, they were approached by delegates from dozens of countries, all eager to discuss Maya's proposals for child advocacy programs. Clara watched her daughter navigate these conversations with diplomacy and intelligence that would have impressed her even if Maya had been an adult. Mrs. Cole, came a familiar voice behind them. Clara turned to find William Cross, who had flown in from New York specifically to hear Maya's speech. In the 3 years since his apology and transformation, he had become an unexpected ally and friend, dedicating much of his time and resources to the children's advocacy movement. William, Clara said warmly, I didn't expect to see you here. I wouldn't have missed this for anything, Cross said, his eyes still focused on Maya as she spoke with a delegate from Sweden. That young lady just changed the course of international children's rights policy. I hope you realize what an extraordinary person you're raising. We realize, Daniel said simply, every single day. Cross turned to face them both. I need to thank you again for allowing me to be part of Maya's journey. Watching her grow into this role has been one of the most inspiring experiences of my life. You've been part of her success, Clara said honestly. The foundation you established gave her the platform to develop her voice. No, Cross said firmly. Maya would have found her voice with or without my help. I just provided one of many tools she's used to change the world. As the evening wound down and delegates began to leave, Maya finally made her way back to her parents, her face glowing with exhaustion and exhilaration. How did I do? She asked suddenly, looking like the 13-year-old she was, instead of the poised advocate she'd been on stage. You were perfect, Clara said, pulling Maya into a fierce hug. I have never been more proud of anyone in my entire life. Really? Maya asked, her voice small and hopeful. Really? Daniel confirmed, joining the hug. You just changed the world, Maya. Literally changed it. That night, as they sat in their hotel suite overlooking the East River, Maya finally allowed herself to show the vulnerability she'd hidden during her public appearances. Do you think Daddy would be proud of me? She asked quietly. Clara felt her heart clench. Even after 3 years of happiness with Daniel, Maya still sometimes needed reassurance about her father's approval and love. "Maya," Clara said gently, "your father would be so proud of you that he wouldn't be able to stop talking about it. He'd be calling everyone he knew, showing them videos of your speech, bragging about his incredible daughter, who's making the world better for other children. He'd also be worried about you taking on too much responsibility too young," Daniel added with a slight smile. "Just like we are. But he'd support your choice because he'd trust your judgment, just like we do." Maya nodded, seeming satisfied with these answers. "I miss him sometimes. Not all the time like I used to, but sometimes." "That's exactly how it should be," Clara said softly. "Missing him means you loved him, and loving him means he's still part of who you are. And loving Daniel doesn't take anything away from loving Daddy," Maya added, reaching for Daniel's hand. "Nothing at all," Daniel confirmed. "Love isn't a finite resource, Maya. The more you give, the more you have to give." As Maya went to bed that night, Clara and Daniel found themselves alone on the hotel balcony, looking out at the city lights and processing what they'd witnessed. "Can you believe that's our daughter?" Clara asked in wonder. "Some days, no," Daniel admitted. "Some days I still feel like I'm going to wake up and discover this has all been an incredible dream." Clara leaned against the railing, thinking about the journey that had brought them to this moment. "Daniel, do you ever regret it, giving up your quiet life to become part of our chaos?" Daniel was quiet for a moment. "Clara, 3 years ago, I was working 3 jobs just to pay my mother's medical bills, living in a 1-bedroom apartment, and thinking that was the best I could hope for. Now I'm married to an amazing woman. I'm the father of a daughter who's changing the world, and I wake up every morning knowing that my life has meaning and purpose." "That's not an answer to my question," Clara said, with a slight smile. "Yes, it is," Daniel said firmly. "How could I regret any of this, even the difficult parts, even the media attention and the pressure and the constant worry about Maya taking on too much? How could I regret being part of something this extraordinary?" Clara reached for his hand, marveling, as she always did, at how perfectly it fit with hers. "I love you, Daniel Cole." "I love you too, Clara Cole, and I love the life we've built together." The next morning brought news that would change everything once again. Maya was reviewing congratulatory messages on her tablet when she suddenly went very still. "Mom, Dad," she said quietly, "you need to see this." Clara and Daniel looked over her shoulder to read an email from Dr. Chen. The UN was so impressed with Maya's speech and the positive response from member nations that they were offering her a permanent position as the first ever children's ambassador, with the authority to investigate family court systems worldwide and make binding recommendations for reform. "They want me to move to Geneva," Maya said, her voice carefully neutral, "to work full-time for the UN." Clara felt the world tilt underneath her. This was the opportunity of a lifetime, the chance for Maya to have global impact on an issue she cared deeply about. It was also the prospect of her 13-year-old daughter living on another continent, taking on responsibilities that would consume her entire adolescence. "What do you want to do?" Daniel asked carefully. Maya was quiet for a long time. "I want to say yes," she finally admitted. "But I don't want to leave you. You're my family." "Maya," Clara said gently, "families don't stop being families just because they're separated by geography. If this is what you want to do, we'll make it work." "But you'd have to give up so much," Maya protested. "Your business, your life in New York, everything you've built." Clara and Daniel exchanged another wordless communication. This time the decision was easy. "Maya," Daniel said softly, "your mother built Hayes Industries to provide for your future. But your future isn't about money or business empires. Your future is about using your gifts to help other people. If that means moving to Geneva, then that's what we'll do." "You'd really move to Switzerland for me?" Maya asked, her eyes wide with surprise. "Sweetheart," Clara said, "3 years ago you chose me as your mother and Daniel as your father. Now we're choosing to follow you wherever your dreams take you." Maya burst into tears, the first tears Clara had seen from her in months. "I love you both so much." "We love you too," Clara said, pulling Maya into her arms. "And we're so proud of the person you've become and the difference you're making in the world." 6 months later, the Cole family stood in their new home in Geneva, watching the sunset over Lake Geneva, through windows that were smaller than their Manhattan penthouse, but somehow felt more welcoming. Maya was at the kitchen table working on a proposal for children's advocacy programs in refugee camps. Daniel was reviewing architectural plans for a children's rights training center. Clara was on a video call with Victoria Sterling, who was managing Hayes Industries from New York with remarkable efficiency. "Any regrets?" Daniel asked Clara as they watched Maya work with the same intense focus she'd inherited from her mother. "About leaving New York, about restructuring the company, about following our 13-year-old daughter to another continent so she can save the world." Clara considered the question seriously. Not one single regret. Maya looked up from her work, catching the end of their conversation. "You know what's funny? I used to think that choosing Daniel that day in the boardroom was the most important decision I'd ever make. But now I realize it wasn't really a decision at all." "What do you mean?" Daniel asked. "I mean, it wasn't a choice between different options," Maya explained. "It was just me recognizing something that was already true. That you were supposed to be my father, that we were supposed to be a family, that everything that happened afterward was just the universe making sure we ended up where we belonged." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. Even at 13, Maya had a wisdom about love and family and destiny that took Clara's breath away. "So what's the most important decision you've ever made?" Clara asked. Maya smiled the same radiant smile that had convinced Clara to trust her choice 3 years ago. "Deciding to trust that if I stayed true to myself and fought for what I believed in, everything else would work out the way it was supposed to." "And has it?" Daniel asked. Maya looked around their cozy Swiss home at her parents, who had literally moved continents to support her dreams, at the work spread across the table that would help children around the world have voices in their own lives. "It's worked out better than I ever imagined possible," Maya said simply. As the evening settled around them and the lights of Geneva began to twinkle in the distance, Clara reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them to this moment. It had begun with tragedy and loss, continued through conflict and controversy, and somehow arrived at this place of purpose and peace. Maya had taught them all that the most important choices weren't always the most obvious ones, that wisdom could come from unexpected sources, and that love was powerful enough to overcome any obstacle when people were brave enough to trust in it. "You know," Clara said to her family as they prepared for bed in their new home, "I think Maya was right about the universe making sure we ended up where we belonged." "Where do we belong?" Daniel asked. Clara looked at her husband and daughter, this family that had chosen each other against all odds and conventional wisdom, and felt a sense of completeness that she'd never experienced before. "Together," she said simply. "We belong together, wherever that takes us." And as the Cole family settled into their new life in Geneva, preparing to take on the world's problems one child at a time, Clara knew that Maya's original choice had been more than just a 10-year-old girl picking a father. It had been the first step in a journey that would change not just their lives, but the lives of countless children around the world who would benefit from Maya's courage, conviction, and unwavering belief that love was the most powerful force in the universe. The little girl who had once stood in a Manhattan boardroom and pointed to a janitor, declaring him worthy of her love, had grown up to become exactly what the world needed. A voice for the voiceless, an advocate for the forgotten, and living proof that sometimes the most important decisions come not from experience or expertise, but from the simple wisdom of a heart that knows what love looks like. And in the end, that was the most important lesson of all.